Oh my goodness. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is for you. I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Zach Schomler. This is Strong Opinion Sports, episode 657. Welcome in, and joining me as always today, my good friend Nathan Hawthorne. Nathan, how are you?
Oh, I am so excited for tonight. I can't even describe it. I'm stoked.
I think we're going to have our most contentious episode we've ever had. Today's episode is called Predictions for the 22 Most Interesting Programs in College Football. And so now, how do you determine most interesting? The truth is, Zach sits down and goes, what 22 teams do I care about? That's how it works. So sorry, if a team that you like is not on this list, I apologize. I'm not that interested in them. And I picked the 22 teams. It's my show. I can do what I want.
And unfortunately for Zach, the Bears are not a college football team. Therefore, we will not be able to talk about the Bears and Caleb Williams. But in all seriousness, the gloves are going to come on today. We're going to be going back and forth. It's going to be awesome.
Now, I did the heavy lifting of today's show. I went through these 22 teams. I made predictions like wins and losses. I went through, I'll show you, like, for example, I've got all these stacks of paper or schedules for a bunch of college football teams. I went through every win or every game, picked wins and losses. It's a lot. It was a lot of work. I'm proud of it. What I'm hoping today, because the reason we have to do predictions, in my opinion, you got to set like a expectation going into the year, what you expect from a team. It's fun to set like a baseline and then judge everything against it. Part of the fun is being wrong. I have no problem being wrong. I'm open to being wrong. In fact, I revel in that. I love going like, oh, well, I was totally wrong about Florida State. Let's talk about why. Like, that's actually a really fun conversation for me. I really take my ego out of this decision-making process. And I can't wait for the episode in February where we go back and revisit these 22 teams and go, how far off was Zach? I also want to offer to you, Nathan, I am comfortable editing. I'm going to tell you what wins and losses I have. And if you're like, hey, Zach, Alabama at this record is crazy, you got to carve out more wins. I'll be like, well, but where? And then we'll have that conversation. So my 22 predictions now could change by the end of the episode. I'm encouraging you to push back. I also, though, have strong opinions. I'm curious from you to hear your perspective. I think the audience is going to really like you this episode. I would imagine you're going to speak for a lot of people that are going to be frustrated by my unconventional approach to college football this year. I'm excited, though. Did you have any thoughts going in? Anything else you want to add?
The only thought is that there is only one team that matters, and that is the University of Oregon. You can see it right here. You can see it right here. If you guys have noticed the cameo this water bottle has made the entire time I've been on the show, it's all about the Ducks, baby. That's all I have to say, and we can get into it.
You know, we grew up in the Northwest. I actually live in downtown Portland, Oregon, right? So I'm the guy who still lives in Oregon. Although you'll find me very much not a homer. I do not play favorites. I'm not necessarily a fan of the local team. Like, I went to Washington State for years and legendarily hated on them on their campus. I was like making fun of people who thought Luke Falk was like the next Tom Brady. I was like, no, I watch the guy play every Saturday live. He's not the next Tom Brady. Same with Anthony Gordon. I try to be very objective and honest with my opinions. Even if I'm wrong, I own it. Do you want to start with team number one today? We're going to go through 22 in a row. We'll get to Oregon down the road. That one's going to be really fun. But you want to start with team number one today?
Let's start with team number one.
Okay. You're about to hear me make a mistake. I said 7-4. I meant 8-4. And I do realize mid-segment, if you wait a couple moments, you'll hear me realize it. But I want to get ahead of it, get ahead of the comment. Before you write in an angry comment, this guy's an idiot, doesn't know what he's talking about. No. I just forgot the Missouri victory, and I miscounted. So 8-4 is what I meant to say. I say 7-4. And in fact, if you listen to the whole segment, that's not even our final prediction. So take a listen to what I have to say. Enjoy the Alabama prediction. And this is me now acknowledging I got it wrong. I said the wrong thing. And it happens to the best of us. I have the Alabama Crimson Tide going 7-4 this year. We'll talk about why. They've got a new head coach, Kalen DeBoer. I really like their quarterback, Jalen Milroe. I'm really interested to see what kind of impact Kalen DeBoer has on Jalen Milroe, his development. I really like, I think you say his name is Jeremy Bernard, the wide receiver from Washington. They're not going to lose. They're not going to beat Georgia. That's for sure. I think they take a step backward because of how many people they lost to the transfer portal. If you look at this team, a lot of people saw a new coach coming in, and a lot of the best players on other programs' teams are directly from this Alabama roster last year. So a lot of people left. They got a new head coach. I'm not sure what to make of them. I got them 7-4, and I can tell you what 4 losses I have. But what is your immediate reaction to that record prediction?
7 wins for an Alabama team is insane. Insane. It's a minimum 10-win team, no matter what. We are only 1 year removed from Nick Saban. Yes, Kalen DeBoer is the new head coach, but it's not like he's walking into an empty kitchen cupboard. There is talent on there. Like you said, he's got Jalen Milroe, a different maybe quarterback archetype than he's used to, but 7 wins just, I need to hear what these losses are for me to be able to understand where that comes from.
Yeah, let's get into it. First of all, I will say again, as I looked through these 22 teams and built out, figure out who their best players were. So many of the best players on other teams' rosters are transfers that left Alabama. They found out they had a new head coach. They found out Nick Saban was leaving. The reason they went to Alabama, and they're like, well, I'm not going to stay here if Nick Saban isn't here. And part of why I have them at 7-4 is just a direct reflection of, hey, it's a new Alabama team. It's a new program. The coach is gone. It's the post Nick Saban era. Also, there's a reason. Ryan Grubb was the offensive coordinator last year in Washington. He chose not to come with Kalen DeBoer to Alabama. There's something to that. I don't know what that is exactly. He chose to go to Seattle and be the offensive coordinator of the Seahawks. I just wonder.
College coaching to NFL coaching. It's a different paycheck.
Well, it's also and less responsibility
in Seattle. And
it's also less dealing with recruiting, less dealing with the headache that is college football and the circus and the carousel. But there's something to that. I wonder. Here are the 4 losses I have Alabama. They're losing to Georgia, September 28th. I think we would probably both agree. Do we agree they're going to lose to Georgia?
I think that game could go either way, but I could see that. Really? I can see why that's a loss. Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I have Georgia, LSU, Tennessee, at Tennessee in October. So they lose at LSU and at Tennessee. And then they lose at the end of the year at home to Auburn. That's the one I'm willing to compromise on. I'm willing to go 8-3 rather than how do I have what am I think I have something wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so they're 8-4. So 8-4, not 7-4, because I counted a win wrong. I have them beating Missouri as well. So 8-4. I'm willing to make that 9-3 if we want to talk about the Auburn game. But again, this is the first Iron Bowl for Kalen DeBoer. And I think what happens in your first season with a team, you lose games you shouldn't. There are weird moments that happen. So let's correct the record. I meant 8-4 when I said 7-4 earlier. But 8-4 could become 9-3 if they win the Iron Bowl. But I think it's an 8-win, 9-win team, not a 10-win team at Alabama, given losing Nick Saban, given what's going on. I apologize, by the way. The immediate start to the show with a wrong prediction, like literally like the wrong win total is crazy. I apologize, people out there. Let's go 8-4 because I somehow didn't hit the W next to Missouri on my little list here.
Yeah. The correct answer would have been 10-2. They are not losing to Tennessee, even on the road. Tennessee, now they are 1 year removed from Joe Milton, 2 years removed from Jalen Hyatt. I don't think that they have they don't have a good enough offense or defense to be able to hang with Alabama, even when they were at their most talented. Not that superb. And then I want to follow that up with, they're not losing to Auburn at home. I get that it's the first Iron Bowl, but Auburn has not been good the past couple of years. And I know that they always get the SEC bias, and Auburn is never a team that you can count out, but they're just not losing at home to Auburn. Unless we've got like another crazy kick six situation.
I'm willing to kind of compromise here and say 9-3. They win the Auburn game. I really think what I've learned doing these predictions, every year you're bound to lose to a team you shouldn't lose to. You got to almost predict like a wild card loss, a random one that you're like, hey, I think a great opportunity for this team to lose a game they probably shouldn't is on the road at Tennessee, October 19th. So I'm going to stand pat 9-3. Again, I'm fine. I'll compromise. Let's give them the Iron Bowl. So that takes them from 8-4 to 9-3. But I think they lose to Georgia. I do think they lose at LSU November 9th. And I think on the road at Tennessee in a really tough environment, I think they lose that football game. So I've got Alabama going 9-3 this year in 2024.
Yeah, again, I think that I definitely don't trust that Tennessee game for them to lose. Again, I know it's on the road. I know that they are strong at home, maybe, but yeah, definitely not Auburn. They finished 6-7, I think, last year. Not very good. But LSU and Georgia, very, very possible losses, especially LSU on the road.
Why do you feel why LSU on the road and not you're less sure about Georgia? I think Georgia is literally the best team in college football. I think they were last year. I really thought Georgia kind of got robbed of an opportunity to win a national title.
Do
Now
they
they lost
have
that game, but man, I thought Georgia was the best team last year. I think they're better this year. There's no Nick Saban. I don't even think it's a conversation. I think actually Georgia wins against Alabama comfortably. Like I think really it's that big of a leap without Nick Saban involved in this football game, and with the players Alabama's lost this offseason in the transfer portal. Again, I think Georgia comfortably beats Alabama, and it's not as close as you might be suggesting.
who has the home game for that?
It is at Alabama.
It's at Alabama. I
Yep.
think that probably is worth a touchdown, being in
Sure.
Tuscaloosa. But I think you're right. Georgia is the better team, and I thought was the better team last year. Like you just said, you sometimes lose to a team that you shouldn't. Um, yeah, Georgia's a great team. They got a great returning quarterback. We'll talk about them later. But yeah, certainly a loss to Georgia, although I do think it'll be close. It's not going to be a blowout, in my opinion. Um, yeah, we'll have to see. But 10-2, I think, is 10-2 is right. I can see 9-3, but 10-2 to me is right.
So here, the one thing we haven't talked about, because they play a game against, I think a lot of their schedule's pretty easy. At Wisconsin, Wisconsin's no slouch, but I think they win that game. I think they beat Missouri. I think they beat Oklahoma. Their schedule's actually pretty light, other than the Georgia LSU game and then Tennessee. I think again, outside of these two really tough games, I think you lose a game you shouldn't. I'm comfortable saying 9-3. Let's get it on the record. I've got Alabama going 9-3, but would you say 10-2?
I'm going to say 10-2.
Okay. Nathan says 10-2. Zach
Mark
says
it,
nine and
folks.
three.
Mark it.
Yeah, we'll find out. We'll revisit this in February. Ready to talk about Florida?
Let's talk about Florida.
Here's one that's going to be flaming hot, and I apologize. I actually think Florida has one of the most difficult schedules in college football. I look at their final 5 games, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that is a gauntlet. It's really tough. On top of that, they got a quarterback I don't love, Graham Mertz. He's not terrible. He's efficient. He's safe. He's kind of limited. You got a coach on the hot seat, Billy Napier. I've got Florida going 3-9, which I know is not going to make people very happy. If that does actually happen, Billy Napier's out, dude. He's probably fired midseason. A 3-9 season is not going to cut it, given the expectations Florida has. But here are the losses I have. Week 1, they play Miami. I think Miami's a better team, the better quarterback. I think they lose to Texas A&M. I think they lose to Central Florida. I know that's crazy. We'll talk about why. I think they lose to Tennessee. And then the final 5 games of the year, Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida State. At Florida State, at Texas.
Brutal.
That's a really tough back end of the year. Even if they're 5-7, it's not enough for Billy Napier to keep his job. They got to have a good year, regardless of whether my win total is correct. Again, if I'm off by 2 wins and they're still 5-7, that's still horrible. I think the biggest takeaway from this, looking at the schedule, is I think Billy Napier is out after this year. I think he's going to get fired. They're going to move on. And it's sad. Billy Napier is 11-14 at Florida, but he went 40-12 at Louisiana Lafayette. He's not a bad coach, but I think he's over his skis here at Florida. They got some people that transferred in I like, but what's your immediate reaction, first of all, to 3-9? Is that too low maybe for Florida? We could find more wins if we want. What's your take? How do you keep track of your subscriptions? Can you tell me for sure how many you have and who is taking money from you each month? Have you ever had trouble canceling a subscription? Or have you ever discovered you were being charged for something you didn't think you should be charged for? Well, Rocket Money can help you. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps to lower your bills. I can see all of my subscriptions in one place, and if I see something I don't want, I can cancel it with a few taps. I never have to get on the phone with customer service. Plus, they'll even try to get you a refund for the last couple months of wasted money and negotiate to lower your bills for you by up to 20%. All you got to do is take a picture of your bill and Rocket Money takes care of the rest. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has helped save its members an average of $720 a year, with over $500 million in canceled subscriptions. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/SOS. That's rocketmoney.com/SOS. rocketmoney.com/SOS.
Yeah, to me, Florida 3-9, and this is kind of what you just said. 3-9, yeah, okay. It's just below 500 to me is what the ceiling is for this Florida team. Billy Napier does appear to be over his skis. You found a really nice way to say Graham Mertz is bad. Sorry to all my Florida fans. Yes, limited. I don't think very accurate throwing the football. He's kind of a big guy. Like I don't see him being able to win games for you. A lot of times you'll see head coaches benefit from having top tier or elite level quarterbacks who can save you and make your playmaking and make your offense look spectacular. Napier, as an offensive guy, just doesn't have that. This Florida team is going to be so bad offensively, and they're going to be less than middle of the pack defensively. Billy Napier is probably the first head coach to get fired.
Yeah, I'm open-minded. I try to always, let's look at what could go right for Florida. Let's say Graham Mertz has a Joe Burrow type transformation where he just takes a huge jump in his second year at Florida. You're like, oh my gosh, he's suddenly way better than we thought. They got a transfer wide receiver, Tamir Dyke from Wisconsin. They got a transfer wide receiver, Elijah Badger from ASU. Maybe those two moves make a huge difference. They are losing Ricky Pearsall to the NFL. They got two tight ends I like, Arliss Boardingham and Hayden Hansen. Look, maybe the tight ends are better than we think. Maybe the wide receiver transfers make a big impact. And then on top of that, maybe Graham Mertz is way better than we think it's going to be. All that being said, the biggest problem at this Florida program is their linemen up front. The offensive and defensive line are a problem. And I think they're going to end up losing games they shouldn't. I think they lose to Central Florida because of their defensive line. Their best defensive linemen transferred to Ole Miss. Like they are literally, it's not good what's going on in the trenches at Florida. And it's hard to win in the SEC against LSU, Texas, Georgia, Ole Miss, even Florida State I throw in there. You're not going to win games if your linemen are struggling. And that's why I think they slip up against a Texas A&M, a ranked team, 20th in the country going into the year. I think they lose to Texas A&M straight up. I think they lose to Miami. I have them losing to Tennessee. The most controversial loss is Central Florida. Look, if I'm wrong and it's a 5-win season instead of a 3-win season, sure. But we're splitting hairs at that point. I think we both agree we're headed towards doomsday for Billy Napier's tenure here in Florida. Do we agree there?
100% agree.
Do you want to add a win or two? And where would we if we did? Do you like 3-9 or you want to go higher?
I think UCF is probably the most realistic win. I think Florida State, also there's a chance there. I know everyone is still maybe a little bit high on Florida State. Myself, not so much. But yeah, maybe those are the 2 wins I would add. But outside of that, and like I said, that backside of the schedule, brutal. No shot.
The unfortunate thing, like that Florida State game, right? Florida State's got a better quarterback, better offensive line, better front seven, better coach. Like you go down the list, there's not a single thing Florida does better than Florida State. Even though I'd like to give them that win. I really would, actually, believe it or not. I look at Central Florida and I go, man, say what you want about Gus Malzahn. I think him with KJ Jefferson is really interesting. Their linemen are going to be awesome. They're going to be fun in the trenches. That's the one I'm most uncomfortable with. This loss to Central Florida is that's a risk. I acknowledge that. But if they're 4-8, I'm still going to be like, dude, I got it pretty much right. I'm really comfortable. A 4-win, 3-win season. It's going to be a really ugly year at Florida this year. On the record, I got 3-9, but we'll see. I'm happy if I'm wrong or 2 by a game. But it's, again, the takeaway is Billy Napier's out after this year at Florida.
Yeah, and you'd like to be wrong. You never want to see a head coach get fired, but we got to be realistic.
Oklahoma is a tough one, man. Oklahoma, it's their first year in the SEC. Brent Venables in his 3rd year. I've been waiting for his defenses to work out. He's a defensive head coach. He was a great defensive coordinator at Clemson. I've been waiting, and it hasn't happened at Oklahoma. I'm really skeptical of their quarterback, Jackson Arnold, their new guy. I'm skeptical of their untested offensive line. And again, I've been waiting for the defense to be good. I've got Oklahoma going 5-7. We can talk about the 5 wins. We can talk about the 7 losses, but I think, unfortunately, Oklahoma is going to go to the SEC and get kind of hit in the mouth and be surprised by what they find. They're going to move up to a bigger, better conference, and it's not going to be great in year one for them. What say you?
It's going to be ugly. Venables gets fired. To me, it's between him and Napier for who gets fired first, who has the worse start than the other one. But yeah, just you hit the nail on the head where we're waiting for that defense to be good. Now, it was never great under Lincoln Riley, right? Because they were always so offensively heavy, and he had his coordinator, Alex Grinch, at the time, who he took to USC, and that turned out to be a disaster as well. So maybe it's going to take, a couple of recruiting cycles to get the bodies that you want for that defense. But if the defense isn't good this year, Venables is certainly out. And if the offense can't at least put up points on a better basis than they did last year, then they are going to have a worse season, and it's going to get real ugly real quick for everybody there. This could be another, again, it'll look just like Florida. If you have a bad start, everybody's out.
I think they start 3-0. They play Temple, Houston, then Tulane back to back to back. I think they are a 3-0 start to the year. But then they play Tennessee, Auburn, and Texas. Is Oklahoma better than Auburn? Like that's where we're at with Oklahoma, right? Maybe they win that game, and I'm open to that. But that's a conversation we're really having. A not great Auburn team is a coin toss with Oklahoma. And I want to be very clear about something. I really believe in the potential of the Oklahoma program. There's a lot of money there. There's a lot of fandom there. There's great facilities. And I think
it's a historic program.
Dude, if Brent Venables is given 3 years, I would like to see what he can do with 3 years of recruiting in the SEC. Part of why the defense was so hard to build was they were in the Big 12, which had really limited practice restrictions, and the talent isn't quite the same. I do wonder what can happen in 3 or 4 years of Brent Venables at Oklahoma. However, I don't think he's going to get 3 or 4 years. He's already had 2 years. It hasn't gone great. You don't have a great quarterback. You're not an offensive head coach. I just don't think he's going to get enough time to really show what could be done at Oklahoma. I think they're going to be impatient and move on to a coach who can win faster and maybe is a better recruiter.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Going into the SEC, and we're talking about this game against Auburn here, Auburn's just got bigger bodies, man. You're going to have a largely Big 12 roster going up against an SEC roster. We've seen what happens through the course of history when those types of teams match up. I mean, we had Georgia face a very, very good TCU squad in a natty, and it was a blowout. I was asleep by halftime. I'm not saying that's what we're going to see between Auburn and Oklahoma, because I don't think they're both great teams. But man, it makes a big difference in the trenches when you got those big, heavy bodies leaning on you. It gets to the fourth quarter. I don't think that they're going to have the gas to play with these SEC teams. And Texas, their Big 12 counterpart is kind of already built like an SEC team. They happen to be bigger in the trenches. Shout out to Sarkisian doing some recruiting. So, yeah, going to be tough. Venables, I think, is culprit number 2 to be fired.
Yeah, the 5 wins Oklahoma has, in my opinion, Temple, Houston, Tulane, South Carolina, and Maine. They lose to Tennessee, Auburn, Texas, Ole Miss. Then at the end of their final 3 games, Missouri, Alabama, then at LSU. I think that's actually really accurate. I think 5-7 is exactly what's going to happen. Yep. You got any more things you want to say about Oklahoma?
They could beat Missouri. But again, that's, being really picked. Like, there's a chance to beat Missouri. Missouri's not historically an excellent team, but, who knows?
Yeah, for me, Missouri went 10-3 last year. They returned Brady Cook, their quarterback. Same coach, same quarterback as last year. Whereas Oklahoma is downgrading at quarterback. I don't know, man. I think a really stable program that won last year at Missouri.
Big misspeak on my part. Then shout out Missouri, looking better.
Yeah, to me, I think it's. I feel really comfortable saying that 5-7 is exactly what's going to happen to Oklahoma. I don't see it going up or down either. I think 5-7 is exactly what's going to happen, and I'm excited to look back in February and go, yeah, like I nailed it there. I really think that's going to be my most accurate prediction, maybe this entire show.
Lock it in.
Georgia. I've got the Georgia Bulldogs going 12-0. I'm really confident in Georgia. I've got a couple teams going 12-0 here, actually, but I really feel very comfortable with that. Now, this doesn't equate to what's going to happen in the SEC title game. We don't know what that matchup's going to be. I think they're going to go 12-0 in the regular season. I do think they run the table and go 13-0, win the SEC title as well. I think this is head and shoulders. There's two teams that are better than everyone else in college football. My number 2 team is going to be really controversial. I know that already. But to me, Georgia is the clear number 1 team in the country and should be the favorite by a mile to win the national title. I feel like actually no one's talking about the fact they got kind of robbed last year. I think they really legitimately got kind of snubbed with what happened to them.
Blind.
I know they lost, but I think they were the best team in the country and didn't really get a shot at a national title. And it felt really uncomfortable to me watching that. I think they do beat Michigan. I think they do beat Washington if they have a second game. They had one slip up last year, and it kept them, it gated them away from even having a shot at the national title, not getting into the college football playoff. To me, especially with that context, this is a Georgia team that's going to come back ready to go. Nick Saban is gone. It's a new SEC. They're the top dogs by a mile. There's not a lot of controversy here. In fact, they got better. They added Trevor Etienne, the running back from Florida. He transferred in.
Yes, big time.
Dominic Lovett is back for his senior year, the wide receiver. I just think this is going to be a really dominating force in college football. I don't know that I have much to add. I think I'm just really comfortable saying Georgia's by a mile the best team in college football.
Here's my title.
Okay.
Georgia Bulldogs. Beck in business.
Carson Beck, baby.
Not that they were out of business last year, but again, they got snubbed. They're an excellent team. As long as their players can stay out of jail, they'll be just fine.
Oh my gosh. Hey, you're not wrong. How about LSU? You want to talk about them?
Yeah, let's talk LSU.
LSU went 10-3 last year. They had the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, Jaden Daniels. It's not going to help losing Jaden Daniels. And really, this prediction comes down to whether or not you believe in Brian Kelly, the head coach. I actually do. I really like Brian Kelly. And again, I think with the context, you look around the SEC and go, Nick Saban's gone. What does that mean for everyone else? It means I've got LSU going 11-1. And I know that's controversial. There's one game I was really hung up on and went back and forth on. I do think they beat USC to start the year. Then after that, it's really not a lot of tough games. Texas A&M is interesting. Alabama is interesting. I think they're better than Alabama. They're an established team. Alabama's got a new coach. The game is at LSU. They beat Oklahoma. The only game that's scary to me, I think you got to lose a game. So I had them losing to Texas A&M. So that's 11-1. They actually don't play Georgia. So this could be a 12-0 team going into the SEC title game very clearly. I think you're going to lose a game. It's just what happens. I love Brian Kelly as much as I do. Garrett Nussmeier is a new quarterback. I just think you'll lose a game you shouldn't. But I think, they either lose to Ole Miss or Texas A&M. I went back and forth on the Ole Miss game. I ultimately have LSU beating Ole Miss. I trust Brian Kelly more than Lane Kiffin, but 11-1 is pretty close. It could be 12-0 going into the SEC title game. I just think along the way you lose a game you shouldn't, whether that's USC or Ole Miss or Texas A&M or Alabama. You're not going to win all those games, but 11-1 is pretty comfortable to me for LSU. What say you?
Man, when you put it like that, I got to say 12-0. I know you got that Texas A&M loss, but they've got a new head coach, Mike Elko. They brought a defensive-minded head coach he previously had been there, went to Duke, came back. Yeah. I don't think Texas A&M is going to be very good, and I'm very high on LSU. I'm high on Brian Kelly having his third year. I think Big Nuss is going to have a great year himself, and then the defense. I just think it's going to play better. They're 1 year more mature. They didn't necessarily graduate anybody major from that defense. They are truly set up to go 12-0, and it is great that they don't have LSU. I'm sorry, not LSU. They don't have Georgia on the schedule.
Yeah, man, I think 12-0 going into the SEC title game, it's a very realistic expectation for LSU. They got CJ Daniels, a transfer wide receiver from Liberty. He had 10 touchdowns, over 1,000 yards receiving last year. Xavier Thomas comes over from Mississippi State. He was the number 2 receiver last year at Mississippi State. They got a really good offensive line to LSU. I mean, I just think this team up front, one of the better teams up front in the SEC. It's going to be Georgia and probably LSU right at their toes. I mean, right at their heels, man. I really think LSU is a force to be reckoned with. I'm still going to stick with 11-1. You can say 12-0 if you want going into that SEC title game. I think they do probably ultimately play in the SEC title game. I think no matter whether they're 11-1 or 12-0, they're going to make it into that game. But I really, because again, it's in the SEC this year, it's the top two. There's no East and West anymore. It's just the top two schedules going to play in that game. I think you lose a game you shouldn't, whether that's USC, Ole Miss, A&M, Alabama, Oklahoma. Somewhere along the way, you're going to slip up if you're LSU. It happens. It's part of college football.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty comfortable with LSU at 11-1.
Yeah, I just think offensively they're going to continue to be so talented. And again, I know that they lost Brian Thomas, they lost Malik Neighbors and Jaden Daniels. So you wonder how much more explosion is left in that offense. But again, it's a Brian Kelly coach team. They're going to be solid.
Let's talk about Ole Miss. So one thing we haven't talked about in the SEC yet is I'm really curious about the middle of the SEC. We're talking Kentucky, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Texas A&M, Missouri. These teams that can kind of be ruinous for the top teams of the SEC. To me, Ole Miss is one of the better teams in the SEC. I really like Nick Saban. I love their quarterback, Jackson Dart. They got a DN from Florida, Princely, that I love. Walter Nelton, their defensive tackle out of Texas A&M, transferred over. They've got a lot of really good pieces on the front seven. I like what they're doing up front, and their best wide receiver is coming back, Trey Harris. I've got Ole Miss going 10-2, and it's really funny when you look at these SEC schedules. Like, there's a lot of bogus games, man. Furman, Middle Tennessee, Wake Forest, Georgia Southern. That's their first 4 games of the year. Those are all cupcake games that are just meaningless, basically. You don't play a real game till Kentucky in September, end of September, September 28th. And even the only 2 losses I have at LSU and then against Georgia. 10-2 is exactly where I think they're going to land. What's your initial reaction to that?
To me, and this is a personal vendetta, and I shouldn't even call it vendetta because it's not poisonous. I can't trust Lane Kiffin any more than I can trust Steve Sarkisian. It's always just when you think they're about to get over that mountaintop and maybe turn a corner and be extremely elite, they just don't. And that's how I feel about Ole Miss, and that's how I will feel about any team that's coached by Lane Kiffin. It always looks great, and then something just always doesn't turn out right. So while I'm optimistic that they could go 10-2, and I'm not even sure what the schedule look like it's in its entirety, I could easily see them being an 8-4 team or a 7-5 team just because I don't even know. Just because.
Yeah, again,
there's no stats to back it up. It's just I don't know about Lane Kiffin. And again, they start out with 4 patsies, so you know maybe it is much easier.
To me, bring it in. I'm not going to get this last name right. Princely Umani Malin. I can't say that last name at all. The defensive end from Florida. Bringing in Walter Nolan from Texas A&M. Like, they got really good up front on the defensive line. I think they're the 3rd best team in the SEC. I think it's going to go Georgia, LSU, and then there's a conversation between Ole Miss and like Tennessee. Like, we're going to have that's when interesting conversations begin to happen. I've got them losing. I think the most meaningful game of their year is going to be losing to LSU. They're going to lose to Georgia. I'm comfortable with that. I don't think anyone's going to be Ole Miss fans are going to be upset if they lose to Georgia, but to me, it's like, yeah, that's not a realistic game for them to win. The crushing blow is going to be Saturday, October 12th at LSU in Death Valley, losing that game, and then watching LSU continue on to go to the SEC title game rather than yourself. That's going to be the painful one. They're going to be just short, in my opinion. They get out-coached by Brian Kelly and lose that game. But on the flip side, that could also be the defining moment of their season. If they can beat LSU and they're like, I don't know, 10-0, 9-0 going into the Georgia game, that's a really different conversation. And actually, I kind of hope that happens. I would really love Ole Miss hosting Georgia November 9th at 9-0, both teams undefeated. That'd be a really fun matchup. I just don't think Ole Miss is going to beat LSU. But that's the most crucial game by far on this team's schedule.
Yeah, it is that team's most crucial game for sure. Man, I don't know. See, this is the kind of team that could slip up and lose to an Arkansas or a South Carolina, in my opinion. Like, that's just, again, how I view them. So I think you're right that LSU game will end up kind of being a dagger. But even then, like Mississippi, like you got the Egg Bowl, your last game of the year. That's always an emotional one. So I just can't trust Kiffin. 8-4. I'm gonna hang on 8-4.
What are their 4 losses? Do you think like an Arkansas, an Egg Bowl, LSU, Georgia?
I think they lose. I think they lose the Egg Bowl, and then let's just throw Arkansas on there and say that's out. That's it.
Well, they also play Arkansas at Arkansas the week before Georgia. You could make an argument they get caught looking ahead and they're not quite prepared enough for
Very much
Arkansas.
so.
But the same as they play at South Carolina the week before they play at LSU. Maybe that's another game they're looking ahead rather than taking care of business. I'm going to stick with 10-2, but 8-4 makes sense to me. I understand how you land there, and it'll be fun to revisit in February, see what happens and what we say goes down. I'm really excited to listen back to this going into February and be like, how far off were we? What was wrong? What was right? Do you have anything more to say about Ole Miss?
I don't. Lane, I wish you the best, but I don't have faith in you.
Let's talk about Tennessee, the Tennessee Volunteers. I am so excited to watch their young quarterback, Nico Iamaleava. Iamaleava. I cannot, it's a tough one. Iamaleava. It's going to be ugly. I'm going to have to say it all year. Unfortunately, because his last name's tough to say, he's an incredible quarterback. He's going to be a sophomore. I'm so excited to watch him. I think he's going to... Incredible is maybe an overstatement for where he's at now, but by the end of the year, I think we're going to be saying that. He's going to take big strides forward. They lost Joe Milton, I think upgraded at quarterback with a young guy who's going to be really interesting and really fun.
Yeah.
They also got Keenan Peely, a linebacker from BYU, to transfer over. I've got Tennessee going 9-3. I think they are like that 4th best team in the SEC. They're close. They got Josh Heupel, a coach who's been there for a while. To me, their 3 losses are Kentucky, at Georgia, and NC State. And that's going to be controversial. I've actually got them beating Alabama, beating Florida, beating Oklahoma. It's college football, man. Things happen. You lose games you shouldn't lose. And maybe they beat NC State and lose to Alabama instead. Maybe it's a different conversation. But to me, I think 9-3 is pretty accurate. I don't know exactly what their losses are. I think Georgia's one of them for sure. I don't have confidence this is a team with a first-year quarterback that's not an established team at the top of the SEC anyway. This isn't LSU. This isn't Ole Miss. They're trying to prove themselves. I think in another year or two, when Nico gets older, he's more developed, he's a junior and a senior, then we're talking 10-win seasons and really competing for the top of the SEC. I think they're a year away from that. But to me, 9-3 is pretty accurate for Tennessee, even if the way we got there, again, I've got them losing to NC State, Kentucky, and Georgia. Even if it's Georgia, Alabama, and Oklahoma or something, the way we get there might be different. The win total is going to be 9-3, in my opinion. What say you?
You know, this is the team I probably know the least about in college football. I know we're post Milton. Nico is somebody that I'm familiar with. I've watched him play a number of times, both on the field, like full tackle, but then also 7v7. He's a special talent. He's extremely mobile. He's a little bit on the slider side, so I'm excited to see, what a couple of years in a college weight program can do for him. But he's got an arm. He's got an ability to process the field. He's extremely mobile, and he's just going to let it fly. He's one of those guys that's coming in, got a lot of reps coming through high school. He's got a dope younger brother named Madden as well. His name is actually Madden.
Yeah.
The family's just got that pedigree. But yeah, I think Nico is going to be kind of the shining star for this team, and they're going to be as great as he is this year. So like you said, this might be a little bit of a development and learning year. While he's still going to play well, I think maybe won't be good enough to get over the hump against some of those better teams. And yeah, they might be a year or two away from being at the top of the SEC. I think you snuck them in there as like a top 3 team, but between Georgia, Alabama, and LSU, I think they maybe fall closer to like the 5 range.
Yeah. Well, we also forgot Texas as well. So have you met Nico? Have you met him in person?
Met Nico, dapped him up, handed him a pair of cleats.
Yeah. He's big, dude. Like he's just a bigger person than people realize. You're like, oh, that's a tall dude that's lanky and can run and make plays. And
yeah, he's taller, and he's known for wearing these pajama pants when he's out there. You can look up OT7 and check out some of his highlights. He just has this Caleb Williams-esque expression, and love for the game, and that's what you love to see.
Yeah, I think it's year one of him becoming a star, basically, of college football, in my opinion. I really think he's going to be, by the end of the year, people are going to go, whoa, Tennessee got their guy. Oh my gosh.
They're going to fall in love with him.
Yeah, his ability, his personality, all of it. Nico Iamaleava, let's say it that way. And for those of you who don't know, I believe he's Hawaiian Polynesian minimum. The I in the Hawaiian language is pronounced E. So Iamaleava, by my math, that's how you say that. If I'm wrong, correct me. I've got an open mind. My heart is in the right place. I'm willing to be wrong and be corrected. You want to talk about Texas?
Yeah, let's talk about Texas.
Football season is here, and that means it's time to go to football games. Now, the Game Time app makes getting tickets even faster and easier. And prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the start of any sporting event. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And here's what Game Time does for you. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They have flash deals where you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. There are zone deals where you save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats for you. They have all-in pricing where toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. There are seat views where you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And Game Time has a lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And on top of all of that, Game Time has ticket coverage where your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. I've got Texas going 10-2. And first of all, what do you say to that? 10-2 for Texas.
I think 10-2 is kind of a minimum for them. I know that they're jumping into the SEC. You're going to have some different opponents. But 10-2, you're coming out of the college football playoff. You're returning your star quarterback. You need to follow that up. That's all I'm going to say. You need to follow it up.
So they lose to Georgia. I'm comfortable with that. The question is, where's their other loss?
Waxed by Georgia.
They play at Michigan September 7th. I've actually got Texas, winning on the road in the Big House at Michigan. I really strongly believe that, actually. Better coach, better quarterback, more talent. I think they go to Michigan and they win. However, I think emotionally you lose to Georgia and you feel like your season's over and it's just really tough and ugly. And maybe not. Maybe emotionally you're looking for revenge. You're like, all we got to do is run the table again, get back to the SEC title game and rematch. And very well, it could be that Texas is the team playing Georgia in the rematch in the SEC title game. That's possible to me. I think they slip up, though. I've got them losing to Kentucky Saturday, November 23rd, second to last game of the year. I'm willing for this to be another game, whether that's Florida or Oklahoma. Maybe it's a Michigan game like we talked about. Maybe it's Texas A&M at the end of the year. 11-1 is possible, though, for Texas. Let's be very clear about that. I'm open to that possibility. I just think they slip up somewhere. It's what happens in college football. Maybe Quinn Ewers gets hurt. You never know. But I think they're going to be in the college football playoff. They're in that conversation. I've got them at 10-2, but would you push back against me on that?
I'm not going to push back against that. I'm curious, what do you think their toughest 3 games are going to be? Obviously, Georgia's number 1. You can make an argument maybe for Texas A&M or Kentucky. Who are those 3 toughest games?
It's probably Georgia, A&M, and Michigan. I think they honestly their schedule is pretty easy. I look at this Texas schedule. I know they're in the SEC, but Colorado State,
That's
UTSA,
kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, there's not a lot of and then the SEC games they play. Oklahoma, okay, the Red River Showdown, and maybe they'll lose that game. Maybe that's what happens, right? But Oklahoma, Georgia,
Yeah.
Vanderbilt, Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, Texas A&M, and Mississippi State. Their SEC schedule isn't that crazy other than Georgia. So maybe
Yeah,
it's 11 and
they
1.
kind of got the worst of the SEC. Even their out of conference game, right? The big one with Michigan. I think Michigan's going to be on a down year. We can talk about that later. But that's kind of a big win that you go out to a Big Ten game, and I know that it's in the big house, but that's a game you should win. Every game on their schedule, other than Georgia, they should win. Now, this goes back to my point about Kiffin and Sarkisian. I just don't trust them when it matters. In my opinion, they were a better team than the University of Washington last year. They got out-coached, and UW, like they did in all the big games they had over the past 2 years, they just were able to hang around and then find a way to win. Texas should have put them away. Now, fast forward to this year, again, you got Quinn Ewers coming back. You need to be 11-1 minimum. If you don't, to me, that is very upsetting if you're a Texas fan. Now, I don't think you need to go out and win the SEC championship this year because one loss kind of puts you out of it, and we already think LSU and Georgia are going to run away. You're going to be in the college football playoff. They could probably lose 4 games and somehow still end up in it just because they're Texas and there's this crazy SEC bias. But come on, man. Sark, please get your boys playing well in the moments that matter and just win the big one. We've been talking about it for so long. Just do it.
We have to pick a side here, right? Do you think the second best team in the SEC is LSU or Texas?
It's LSU, and the third best
going
team is
LSU.
Alabama, and the third best team is Alabama, and the fourth best team is Ole Miss, and the fifth best team is Texas.
So maybe, but record wise, right? I think you're looking at a situation where we might see Texas and LSU both at 11 and 1 because of the strength of schedule for Texas. And then I don't know how they determine if LSU and Texas are both 11 and 1, their only loss is Georgia. I think LSU makes it in because of the teams they will have beaten along the way compared to Texas. But I don't know how they calculate that. I don't know how the SEC rules mandate though you calculate that. I think one thing worth talking about though, so if one of the factors here is, well, what if Quinn Ewers gets hurt? Well, the good news is they got a backup quarterback, Arch Manning, who I think can play pretty well. They
Let's
also, so we talked about Alabama earlier losing players. Isaiah Bond, wide receiver from Alabama, transferred into Texas. Amari Niblack, a tight end from Alabama, found out about Nick Saban leaving, didn't want to play for Kalen DeBoer. He transferred to Texas. Silas Bolden, a wide receiver from Oregon State, transferred in to Texas. Matthew Golden, a wide receiver from Houston, transferred into Texas. This team got better this offseason. They play a weak SEC schedule. Look, man, maybe it's 11 and 1. Maybe I'm wrong here. And maybe I've got them losing to Kentucky. I picked a random game almost, like who could take them down. Kentucky lost. I think Devin Leary went to the NFL. I believe so. Devin Leary, their quarterback. So, he's with the Ravens. Man, I think we're talking about a Texas program that goes 11 and 1. Their only loss is Georgia, but still doesn't make it into the SEC title game because LSU is also 11 and 1 with a tougher schedule.
Yeah, I think that one thing we're also looking past is the 2 season-ending injuries we had for the Texas running backs just happened within the last 2 weeks. You lost CJ Baxter, your starter from last year to open the season. And then you also lost Christian Clark to a torn Achilles, your backup.
Yeah.
So now you got to go two guys deep, just to have a starting running back. What's that going to look like to have a strong run game to support Quinn Ewers? That'll be interesting as well. I don't think the schedule's tough enough for that to really matter. And that game that they lose to Georgia, definitely not going to matter. But something to certainly keep the eye on. If that offense struggles to start the season, the run game might be an area that we're looking at.
I mean, now we're back to 10 and 2. I think 10 and 2 is the right number for Texas, honestly. I think they lose a game they shouldn't somewhere, whether that's maybe they go to the big house and the running game isn't what they need it to be, and they lose on the road at Michigan in their second game of the year. I mean, that's possible to me. I picked 10-2 for a reason. I'm gonna stick with that. I think 10-2 is an accurate prediction for Texas going into 2024.
I'll go anti here, and I'll go 11-1, and I'm going 11-1 because it's what they should do.
Yeah,
I'm going the opposite way that I did with what's his name, Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. But seriously, they should go 11-1. All signs point towards it. They are a much better team than Michigan, and I know we're saying sometimes you lose games you shouldn't, but the best teams don't lose games they shouldn't, and that's why they're the best teams.
Either we should re-record the Alabama segment, or I want to just say now, like I can't believe I started hot with 7-4. I'm really like, dang it, what a horrible way to start the show today.
Crazy.
That's all I got for the SEC, man. I think 8-4 though, 9-3, right in the pocket for Alabama, honestly. But you want to now talk about the Big Ten?
Yeah, let's transition to the best conference in football.
Okay. Whoa, big boy, slow down. I've got the Michigan Wolverines going at 9-3. Here are their 3 losses, in my opinion. They host Texas, second game of the year. They lose that game. They lose to Ohio State at Ohio State at the end of the year. So that's 2 losses. And then their third loss is at home against right now the number 3 team in the country, the Oregon Ducks. When you look at Oregon and you look at Michigan, Oregon's got a better coach, better quarterback, more people coming back. I think Oregon's a better team than Michigan. I'm actually pretty 9-3 feels generous, honestly, to Michigan. That's assuming they're going to beat USC, assuming they're going to beat Washington. I don't know, man. I'm really not that excited about Michigan this year. I know Sharon Moore, the new head coach, went 4-0 last year as the acting head coach when Jim Harbaugh was gone. But there's no clear QB1. I think their defense is good. I think Wink Martindale is an awesome new defensive coordinator at Michigan. What do you think about what I've said so far about Michigan? 9-3.
To me, it's going to be 8-4, and that's going to be the peak of it. I do think that they lose to USC. I think that USC is going to be better than people expect this year, even though they just lost Caleb Williams. So I do think in that matchup, Michigan certainly loses, and I just don't think that they're going to be able to sustain the momentum. And without having Jim Harbaugh there to right the ship, and this is no credit or this is no disrespect to Sharon Moore, I just don't know who he is as a leader and a coach outside of those 4 games. You start talking about a full recruiting cycle, and you start talking about an off season, and really putting a team together that has your own identity. That is completely different. Now, there's a chance that he could be riding the success like we've seen a number of coaches do that of the coach that came before them. There's a chance that that team is still strong. A lot of the things, culture based are still there, and a lot of things fundamentally are still there. I just, like you said, there's the questions at quarterback, and obviously just the big head coach question mark. So I'm not very high on them this year. I do think that they lose that 4th game, and they could potentially lose to the University of Washington as well, although I think they're going to be down from last year. The two best teams in college football last year, I think, are taking pretty big steps back.
I believe Mike Macdonald was the defensive coordinator of the Ravens. Defensive coordinator 2022. I believe that was Mike Macdonald. It was, so Mike Macdonald, who's now the Seahawks head coach, who was at Michigan last year, was the defensive coordinator of the Ravens in 2022. I say that to tell you that, hey, a guy who's kind of familiar with that system, D'Anton Lynn, is the defensive coordinator now at USC. There's some similarities between what Wink Martindale does and what Mike Macdonald does, and I would assume D'Anton Lynn, the defensive coordinator at USC, coming from a lot of the same background, literally worked with Mike Macdonald, who was at Michigan, but now is at Seattle. They got a lot of the same DNA. I wonder how that plays a factor in this game. But I feel pretty comfortable saying USC is going to lose on the road at Michigan. And it comes down to, frankly, the trenches, man. I've watched USC's defense get... Look, the Alex Grinch era was brutal. I watched Alex Grinch as a defensive coordinator live at Washington State. Then he went to USC and kept stinking it up there as well. I have a hard time moving on from that prejudice. And I really think even a not great Michigan offense that runs the football a ton and is very conservative still puts up points against USC's defense. I think they're soft up front. It's West Coast. It's LA.
Yep, that's fair.
They're flashy. I really don't believe USC can go on the road at Michigan and win yet. I'm willing to be wrong about that, but that's why I've got Michigan at 9-3. I think they do win that USC game. You say 8-4, but I just would push back against that USC game. I don't think USC goes to Michigan and wins September 21st.
Yeah, I do think that that's fair to address the differences in the trenches. Like that's what made Michigan great last year is their physicality up front, both on the defensive and offensive side of the football. However, I've just got faith that things, even if that defense at USC is just a little bit better, it's not bottom of college football, and maybe it's somewhere in the middle, maybe somewhere in the top 25. I just think that is going to be enough to beat Michigan. And I think Miller Moss is a great quarterback. We'll get into USC later, but I'm confident that Michigan loses that game, even at home.
Here's what I will say. USC could win 46-13, right? Like USC's got potential to score a ton of points. I don't know that Michigan does. If Michigan beats USC, it's a grinder. They're running the ball a ton. And maybe they run for like 500 yards. Like maybe that's what it is. It's just USC can't win in the trenches at all on defense and they give up like 300 yards rushing. Maybe that's how that game plays out. But there is a possibility here where USC just puts up points after pours on points, touchdown or touchdown. That is how that game could go. And I don't see that game going that way for Michigan, where Michigan throws for like 500 yards. I could see USC doing that to Michigan. Does that make sense?
Yes, and we have forgotten the biggest X factor of them all when it comes to Michigan and why I think they'll regress this year. They don't have Connor Stallions. They lost Connor Stallions. Okay. He's no longer with the program.
Get out of here, man.
No, but they're going to regress. 8-4 to me makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. I do want to point out again, Wink Martindale as a defensive coordinator is a really good hire. I think he's really interesting there. I think for the kids at Michigan, being coached by a coach who's worked in the NFL for so long and been so successful in the NFL is a good move.
Huge benefit.
Wink Martindale parted ways. We even talked about this recently. He parted ways with Brian Daboll and the Giants to go to Michigan. And I think lifestyle-wise got an upgrade. I think he's going to be much happier there. I don't know what to make of Sharon Moore, this new head coach. We saw... Oh, what's the name? David Shaw, was that his name? At Stanford, who after Jim Harbaugh left, David Shaw took over and was outstanding. Maybe Sharon Moore is David Shaw for Michigan. Maybe Jim Harbaugh left and he takes on and carries on what Jim Harbaugh left behind. And maybe isn't quite Jim Harbaugh, but wins a lot for a while. I'm open to that possibility. I don't want to hate on the guy because I just haven't seen much from him yet. But I don't know what to make of him. I'm really not sure what to expect from Sharon Moore as head coach of Michigan.
My concern and what I did see, and this is passion, right? You want to see that coming from your head coach, but I felt like that was what we saw. We saw a head coach that was handed the script, a guy who was a leader of men, right? Could get all the guys rowing the boat in the same direction. They said, hey, while Jim's out, we need you to keep everything in bounds and don't mess this up and bring the juice and the passion. I just don't know what his X's and O's look like on that defensive side of the football and what his philosophy is to approaching bringing in an offensive coordinator. From my understanding, they promoted their quarterbacks coach to that offensive coordinator position. We don't know anything about him either. So defense, you can expect to be strong, with Moore and Wink back there. But offensively, no idea what that's going to look like. That's going to be tough.
It looks like the quarterback's going to be Alex Orji or Davis Warren. And I know that's a rough last name, by the way.
What?
But I just, to not have a clear QB1 at this point of August is pretty crazy. They're still going through their quarterback battle. What that tells me is that Michigan hasn't named a starting quarterback yet is no one's doing great. There's no one pulling away. There's no one doing so well they can't refuse to make him the starting quarterback. I think we're going to see a pretty mediocre quarterback room at Michigan this year. And that's unfortunate, but that's honest. I think, again, it's a red flag that we're at this point of the season and there's still no QB1 in Michigan. That's just like really alarming to me. And again, that's a sign that no one's killing it at training camp. There's no one that they're like, yeah, this is clearly our guy, which isn't great. You want to talk about Nebraska?
Oh, I'm excited to talk about Nebraska.
Are you really? Actually, for real?
I am. You got the mini Mahomes out there.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's all that's interesting about Michigan. Dylan Raiola is a quarterback at Michigan.
Nebraska.
I'm Nebraska. Thank you. Dylan Raiola is a quarterback at Nebraska, and he made a move to go to Nebraska instead of Georgia. He was scheduled to go to Georgia. He flipped his commitment last minute. I think the reason he did that is he was basically promised to be the starting quarterback. And I think what's going to happen with Dylan Raiola, he's going to be a starting quarterback at Nebraska for a year or two, and then probably go right to Georgia. I really think I think this is Nebraska being the feeder program for the quarterback of Georgia. I think Dylan Raiola starts for a year or two at Nebraska,
Really?
and Carson Beck leaves, and Dylan Raiola goes and plugs right into Georgia. I would not be shocked at all if that happened. I think he did the math and said, look, man, do I want to sit on the bench or be a starting quarterback? I can be a starting quarterback for a year or two and then go anywhere else in college football, get a ton of money in NIL, and go to any program ready for a quarterback, whether that's Oregon or Michigan or Ohio State or Georgia. I think he's hedging his bets that he's going to have an okay freshman year and then can go wherever he wants after that, kind of like a free agent. I've got Nebraska going 6-6. They went 5-7 last year. 6 wins does feel pretty generous to me, but the only reason they're even on this entire show is Dylan Raiola. I'm really fascinated with this rookie, this freshman quarterback they have. First of all, what do you make of 6-6? Does that sound crazy to you?
To me, I had them one game above 500, which I guess isn't really possible when you have an evened out schedule. But 6-6, 7-5 to me sounds right. I do think that Dylan Raiola is going to play great right off the bat. He's got Matt Rule in his corner as the head coach. I can't remember if it's the second or third year of Matt Rule in Nebraska, but I know that he is going to be great offensively for them. And I get what you're saying about Dylan Raiola perhaps transferring to Alabama or a bigger program. But in the world of college football, when it comes to fan bases, NIL, Nebraska might not be sexy, but they are up there as one of the biggest brands in college football. They're a legacy brand. They're one of the blue chips, if you will. Granted, they haven't been great in the last, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years. But if there's a dude that can bring this Nebraska team back to prominence, I think it's Dylan Raiola. And I think if he's playing well first year, second year, things are trending up, why would you leave? Why go plug and play somewhere where you know you can win instead of just keep building on what you have? And I think that's why he stays in Nebraska. And I think that's why in a couple of years, you're probably looking at Nebraska as one of the top teams in the Big Ten.
I want to acknowledge that Matt Rule failed in Carolina as head coach. It didn't work. I still think he's a brilliant college football head coach. Like, he really is. He went to Temple, went 2-10 year one, and by year 3 was 10-4. He went to Baylor and was 1-11 in year 1, and by year 3 he was 11-3. All he's done in his career is rebuild college football programs. He was a failed head coach in the NFL. It's a very different ballgame. NFL versus college is it's not the same beast at all. But I think as a human being, I really like Matt Rule. He comes across as very genuine. He's a person I'd like to play for. I'd like to work for. I really, really like him. And I will say, I know some people who worked in Carolina and they loved Matt Rule. They really liked him as a person, like as a human being going to work for every day. They really spoke highly of him. I just wonder, I think he is going to turn around Nebraska. I think long term, he's going to do what he did at Temple and did at Baylor. The question is, he was at Temple for 4 years and he left. He was at Baylor for 3 years and he left. At the end of the rebuild, he never sticks around. Is he going to rebuild Nebraska, then just peace out again? Or is he going to be there for 10 years? Like, what's his plan here? But I've got them going 6-6.
Real quickly, if I can jump in.
Yeah.
Nebraska is one of the, I don't want to call it a final job, Nebraska is not a stepstone job. You don't go to Nebraska to be like, oh, I'm going to leverage this into going, I don't know. Now, maybe Kalen DeBoer doesn't work out at Alabama and Alabama says, hey, we'll triple you, come here. And to me, that's a completely different situation. But Nebraska is one of those jobs where you get it and you start getting things rolling, you stay put, because it will not get much better in terms of a fan base support and a alumni beneficiary NIL support than what Nebraska has going.
I I think we should say, like, he's made so much money. I don't think Matt Rule is going to be lured away by money, honestly.
No,
It would be an opportunity. If, like, hey, I can get better recruits at Alabama, maybe, or have a better lifestyle. But I could see him very much enjoying Nebraska. They're in Lincoln. I've only been to Lincoln once. I've spent a couple weekends in Omaha. I actually had a friend who was stationed there. I really like Nebraska, like salt of the earth people. It's like it's not, look, it's flat as all get out, dude. It's not like the dream to be there, but I really found it to be a
nothing
very
out there.
underrated place. I really liked Nebraska when I was there. And Nebraska Cornhusker football is like, that's their thing. That's the thing the state does. That's like their number one show in town. And the support is there, man. Like, they are hungry to win. If you get Nebraska to a 10-win season, you're a hero forever. I think that's possible for Matt Rule. I don't think that's possible this year, but long term, that's the conversation we're having. And I'd like to see Matt Rule treat it like Dan Lanning has with Oregon and say, no, I'm here to stay. This is where I'm planting my roots and where I want to, this is my job that I want to be at for 10, 20 years rather than a quick rebuild and I'm out.
Baylor is in Waco, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that either place is spectacular to live, but Lincoln is at least a little bit better than Waco.
Oh, dude, not even a conversation.
As far as the destination.
Lincoln is like got stuff going on, good food, it's fun. It's just cold as hell in the winter, but like, man, I think there are far worse places in the world you could live than Lincoln, Nebraska, especially with money, dude. Your money goes so far in Lincoln, Nebraska, it's not even funny. You can live like a king. With a coach's salary like his, man, like, oh my gosh. He's already set for life, but the levels of comfort you can have, you can basically be like a little king of Lincoln, Nebraska, if you're the successful head coach of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Right. I've got Nebraska losing to Colorado, Purdue, Ohio State, USC, Wisconsin, and Iowa. I've got them beating UTEP, Northern Iowa, Illinois, Rutgers, Indiana, and UCLA, actually. That gets them to 6-6. I initially had them losing to UCLA, which would have made 5-7, but I flip-flop back and forth, eventually just saying, hey, 6-6 is good enough. I could see this being 5-7 very easily. I actually went with 6-6 because it's a step forward. It would be another win than last year, and that was kind of feel good to me. But I think we're right around 500.
Yeah.
7-5, 6-6, 5-7, something like that. That's what's going to happen to Nebraska. But officially, I've got them going 6-6. What say you?
I'm going to go ahead and say 6-5. I think they're going to overachieve this year. I do think that they end up beating 7-5. What did I say?
6-5. Mathematically, that's like saying Alabama's going to go 7-4. No one would say that. That's crazy.
Yeah, 7-5 to me, I think, is the number. I think they do take a step forward, albeit a small step forward, and they start to look really, really good, especially towards the end of the season. I believe you had them losing to Colorado.
Yep.
I think they win that game, especially after how embarrassing that loss was last year. I think they, nut up and win that game, and that's the difference.
Yeah. Otherwise, man, I think losing to Purdue, it's a conversation, but they're not beating Ohio State, Wisconsin, Iowa, or USC. Those are clear losses to me.
They could beat Wisconsin.
You think so?
Wisconsin's not great.
Yeah, but they're more established. They've got Luke Fickell. They've been there a couple of years. I don't think they beat Iowa at Iowa. And I think Wisconsin's a better, more established program than Nebraska. I mean, I understand the conversation. Like, it won't be, I don't think it's as obvious maybe as I'm making it seem like, but I think they do lose to Wisconsin.
You know what? Now that we're talking about this, I don't have my hot take button yet, but hot take. Nebraska could win 9 games this year.
Wow.
They could.
They beat Colorado. So their 3 losses would be Ohio State, USC, and Iowa.
Yeah.
You think they beat UCLA?
Yeah, UCLA is a dumpster fire right now.
Yeah.
They have zero momentum. They lost it all. On top of that, Chip Kelly walked out the door. I don't think there is anything for UCLA this year. And I think even Iowa could be a discussion. We know that they have a great defense, but if you can score 10 points, you can beat Iowa. And you can luck your way into 10 points. I don't know, a pick six, a fumble in field goal territory. Like, it's not winnable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think 8-5 is possible. I wouldn't go 9 wins. If things go their way, they're an 8-win football team. I just like I think again the game in Colorado was embarrassing last year, but I think Colorado's as messy and dysfunctional and wild as they are, I think are still a much better football team than Nebraska, personally.
I don't think Colorado is physically big enough yet. And again, I know that they won last year, but I think Rule is getting things shaped up nicely. I think that they beat Colorado pretty handily.
Okay, I got 6-6 for Nebraska. What do you got? 8 wins, 9 wins?
I got 8 wins, baby.
Yeah. I'm
Actually, you
not. I
got to.
would not be shocked if you ended up being right there. I think that's
Yeah.
very possible. I think that could happen. Honestly, their schedule isn't crazy difficult. Truly,
No,
in my opinion.
they kind of got that. I shouldn't say bottom end of the Big Ten because they do play Ohio State, but they've got very winnable games.
Let's talk about the big dogs in the Big Ten. So I said Georgia is the clear favorite to win the national title, and I hinted, hey, there's another team that I think is going to run the table, and this is where it's going to get really contentious. It's going to be really fun here. I made my decision. I picked a side, and I think one coach is going to really surprise you. I've got Ohio State going 12-0, running the table, playing Georgia in the national title ultimately. And it's really now or never for Ryan Day, their head coach. The pressure's on, and I think he does it. I don't love Ryan Day, but if you can beat Oregon and beat Michigan, which I think they're going to beat Michigan. They've beat Penn State for years. Their toughest game, other than Michigan, is Oregon. I think Oregon's actually a better team than Michigan. So you play at Oregon. That's the really tough game of the year, basically. At end of the year, they host Michigan. They're a much better team than Michigan. They got better coaches, better quarterback, everything. I've got Ohio State going 12-0, and the only controversial one really is that Oregon game at Oregon, October 12th. They've had Penn State's number for years, but it's Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, at Michigan State, Iowa. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins already. If they beat Oregon at Oregon, they're 6-0. Then it's Nebraska, Penn State, Purdue, Northwestern, Indiana, and Michigan. They really aren't playing very many tough teams in that Big Ten. They kind of somehow escaped all the big boys. And like I said, Ryan Day, criticize him all you want. He could never beat Jim Harbaugh, right? Jim Harbaugh, thankfully, is gone. And they've had Penn State's number for years. They've got Chip Kelly. They added Quinshon Judkins, the running back from Ole Miss. He's going to be a
huge
powerhouse.
Pickup. Huge pickup.
I'm really confident in Ohio State. I don't even love Ryan Day. I just think Ohio State's going to run the table, man. I think they got everything they need this year. I know you're probably going to push back in the Oregon game, but other than that, what do you say to that?
you can't walk into Autzen Stadium and win that game. I'm sorry. The Ducks went to the shoe 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, I think, with a worse team than they have now, and they beat that ass. I'm going to the game this year, so I'm going to have a front row seat to exactly what's going on. I think Ohio State does lose to the University of Oregon. I do think it's a close game, but I think I'm going to give Oregon the nod.
You're not biased,
no,
right?
Absolutely no bias. But here's the deal, is right after that game, and this is the scary part, you think maybe you've got a game to relax against Nebraska. That could be scary. And then you follow that up with, I'm telling you, Penn State is going to be a scary effing ball club this year. Their defense is about to be disgusting, and I think Drew Allar at quarterback is going to be able to be a little bit more efficient and effective this year. I'm telling you, just watch out for Penn State. I'm not saying that Ohio State's losing those games to Nebraska and Penn State, but what I'm saying is they are definitely losing to Oregon, no doubt in my mind. And that's it.
That's fine. I hear you. Penn State's not happening, man. Drew Aller, I watched so much of him last year. He was so frustrating to watch. Look, maybe Drew Aller's way better than he was last year. The defense at Penn State's going to be really good. I'd like to see. I should really look it up. I think Ohio State's beat Penn State like 3 years in a row. I mean, it's been they've had their number. Ryan Day, say what you want, he beats the living hell out of James Franklin, the head coach at Penn State. Again, they're tough games at Oregon, at Penn State, and hosting Michigan in the Horseshoe. I think they go 12-0, man. If they can beat Oregon, I mean, that's really their tough game. That's the landmark game. But let's also acknowledge something about Ohio State. If Ohio State doesn't go 12-0 and run the table, I think they got to get rid of Ryan Day. I think that's the conversation we're having is it's now or never. You cannot lose to Michigan without Jim Harbaugh. You really can't. Like, this is the year Ohio State's got to beat Michigan. And I don't know what happens if they lose to Oregon. If they're 11-1, do they keep Ryan Day? Probably. Probably. I'm not really sure. But I think expectations are sky high given Quinshon Judkins. They brought in Will Howard, the quarterback out of K-State. They've got JT Tuimoloau, the defensive end, wide receiver Emeka Egbuka. They've got talent like crazy everywhere. And so many people transferred out of their program to go to Ohio State. I think it's the year. And it's really, you got to just pick. Do you believe in Ryan Day's ability to run the table or not? I do. Part of that's because of Chip Kelly. Part of that's because of the transfers they have. I think that Oregon game is the only one that you're like, man, that's a really tough one. Can they win that game? If they can beat Oregon on the road, they're going to go 12-0 in my opinion.
Let me do this real quick. Hair's a little messy. I'm actually getting a haircut tomorrow, but I'm going to take off the Oregon hat and I'm going to be straightforward about it. Ohio State might be the best team in the country. You bring in Will Howard, the cat from Kansas State, I believe, to be your starting quarterback. You are throwing the ball to Jeremiah Smith. I don't think you mentioned him, but he is a freshman wide receiver. I'm telling you, he is about to be a monster, an absolute monster. I've had the pleasure of seeing him in person as well. He is a physical freak. He has soft hands. He can run every route, and he is just big. He is going to be unbelievable. And then, of course, you have Emeka Egbuka coming back, and then you've also got, Judkins, we already talked about. I think what's interesting about the Penn State game as well is Julian Fleming, who was the number one high school receiver a couple years ago. He transferred to Penn State. So I think that's kind of an interesting, fun storyline. But yeah, Ohio State, man, that's going to be such a great game. I can see a world where both teams win between Oregon and Ohio State, but I could also see Ohio State kind of winning big. And I hate to say that, so let me get my big hat on. Oregon wins by 2 scores. There it is.
I think the audience will appreciate you taking the hat off from it and being objective. I think that's I think it's actually rare to do that in the sports world. Everyone kind of picks their team and has a hard time being honest about stuff. Look, man, I think Georgia and Ohio State are the teams to beat in college football. They're the two best teams on paper,
no doubt,
right?
No doubt.
And especially the level of talent that was brought in. Dude, Chip Kelly coming to Ohio State is so fascinating, man. Like
oh my goodness,
dude.
We didn't talk about him.
You
or
were the head
Caleb
coach
Downs.
at UCLA, and you basically said, "I hate dealing with NIL. I hate dealing with the transfer portal. I just want to coach ball, and I want to have great athletes, and I want to scheme them up to be in great positions to succeed." Dude, I ran the Chip Kelly offense in high school. I mean, basically every play we had, we stole from Oregon. I love his running schemes, like what he does. And him with Quinshon Judkins and the offensive line at Ohio State is a terrifying proposition, man. I just think they're going to be forced to be reckoned with. I think they're going to like run their way through college football. And then, oh yeah, by the way, they can throw the ball really well too. I mean, I really think it's just going to be over and horrifying for teams playing them, honestly.
Yeah, and I don't want to keep, I don't know. I don't want to keep, I don't know how any other, I don't want to keep dick riding Ohio State, but then they also, not only did they have arguably their best defense under Ryan Day last year, they brought in Caleb Downs from Alabama, who started as a corner DBU at Alabama as a true freshman. And he said, all right, well, I'm going to go to Ohio State. How much better that makes him on the back end. Like, this is such a scary football team. And it's not just like big name recruits. It's big name dudes who have already shown that they play at an elite level. Scary.
Yeah,
Ducks
man.
by 30.
Another storyline here. I really think this game, October 12th at Oregon, Ohio State at Oregon, is going to be it's the game of the year, basically, in the Big Ten. Truly. I think that followed up by the legendary rivalry, hosting Michigan. That's going to be fun, but a new rivalry, really. And what's fun about it, it's Chip Kelly going back to Eugene. I mean, like, the storylines for the Oregon-Ohio State game are so deep and so rich. And by the way, I don't know how you got tickets. I couldn't afford to go. I have friends with season tickets and I still couldn't get in. I'm so excited for that game, and I think that's the game of the year. It's real football coming to the state of Oregon for the first time in a long time. And I think Chip Kelly, on an emotional day, going back to Eugene where he took a team to a national title, I think he wins. I know he's the offensive coordinator, but I'm telling you, I bet College Game Day is going to be there for that game. And that's going to be the storyline all week. It's Chip Kelly going back to Oregon. And I think Ohio State beats Oregon in that game. I know it's probably the biggest game of the year for Oregon by far. But to me, Ohio State wins that game and goes 12-0. And then the conversation goes down to what happens in the college football playoff. But I think it's going to be Ohio State and Georgia. If all things go right, it's those two teams meeting in the national title.
Yeah, very much so. No qualms about what you're saying about Ohio State. I got the duck hat on. I got to be true to my dogs here.
Well, let's talk about them. I've got the Oregon Ducks going 11-1. So their only loss is that Ohio State game.
Loss.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sure.
I love what I'm such a fan of Dan Lanning and what he's doing at Oregon, and I think this is a weird part of the conversation I don't think we're having very much, but when you come from a program like Georgia, you bring along the standards, you bring along the expectations. Dan Lanning brought an SEC attitude to the state of Oregon, and that's exactly what was needed. I was briefly an offensive coordinator in high school football, and I tried to bring standards from other programs and apply them to my high school football team. Unfortunately, they didn't like that very much, and they didn't like changes, and I got fired. I haven't talked much about that. It was frustrating to me. I think Dan Lanning did what you're supposed to do, is go to a program that is a little behind the times and a little bit not where they need to be, and taking them exactly where they should be with recruiting, with the attitude, with the expectations. Yeah. I'm a massive Dan Lanning fan. I'm actually not an Oregon fan. I live in the state of Oregon. I'm very much not a homer. I just believe in him. And I look at their schedule. Yeah. Idaho, Boise State, Oregon State, UCLA, Michigan State, Purdue, Illinois. The big game is at Michigan in the Big House on November 2nd. I think they win that game. I think they're head and shoulders a far better team than Michigan. I think they're easily 11-1. The question is, that Ohio State game, what's going to be fun, they're probably going to rematch Ohio State in the Big Ten title game. So then we get to see that game probably for a second time. But Oregon is clearly, to me, the second best team in the Big Ten and should be treated as such.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head here. Again, it's so hard for me not to have that Oregon bias because they are a great team. They brought in Jabbar Muhammad from the University of Washington, an absolute lockdown corner. They still have Dante Manning. To me, their defense is the highlight. Like, we know that University of Oregon is always going to have a good offense. That's kind of what they became known for, starting with the Mike Bellotti era. But they're bringing back some dogs on defense. They're bringing back Jordan Birch, Mateo Ugalele. He's coming back. He played as a true freshman last year. Jeffrey Bassa is coming back. Bryce Betcher. Like, they have some seriously talented dudes on the defensive side of the football. I'm excited to watch. The thing that concerns me with Dan Lanning is not learning from your mistakes. I feel like there's been a number of times where Lanning has had the opportunity to either A, take points, or B, punt the ball away instead of going for it on fourth down. I think that cost him every single time they played the University of Washington and made me just want to rip my own heart out. But I need to see Dan Lanning, after those 2 years, grow in his decision-making as a coach. Now, much like Dan Campbell, he's very aggressive. You know, the two Dans, they always want to go for it on fourth down. But sometimes you got to know when to just take the points, when to punt the ball away, and when to play the game of field position. I need to see that from Dan this year. Otherwise, in a game like Ohio State, you give them an extra possession or you don't take the points when you need to, forget about it. It's game over. But again, I'm excited about this defense that's coming back. And obviously the offense is going to have the fireworks that it usually does.
Yeah, Dan Lanning's a defensive head coach. No one talks about that. He was a defensive coordinator at Georgia before this job. I have high expectations for the things he's going to do with the defense this year. On top of that, we haven't even talked about, man, they got a transfer. They got not one, but two transfer quarterbacks. Dylan Gabriel from Oklahoma to be their starting quarterback. Yep. And then they stole Dante Moore from UCLA, which Dante Moore has been wise to understand that, hey, I benefit from sitting behind Dylan Gabriel for a year. And then also nothing's guaranteed, man. If Dylan Gabriel goes down, they got a really dynamic, really interesting quarterback who was the starter last year as a freshman at UCLA with Chip Kelly. I love the quarterback room at Oregon. And if I think part of why they're 11-0, if on the road at Michigan, Dylan Gabriel gets hurt, hey, Dante Moore's there, ready to go. He's a really capable quarterback. He's literally been a starter in college football before. He's going to really, I think, very comfortably come in out off the bench and do well. I love what's going on at Oregon. I think 11-1 is really perfect. It comes down to that Ohio State game, but I love everything else they got going on. And man, I'm so excited. I just go back to the game. October 12th, hosting Ohio State is the game of the year for me personally. And if I can get into that game, they're 2 hours down the road, down I-5 for me. I'd love to go if I can.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up Dante Moore because he originally committed to the University of Oregon. And then when Bo Nix said, hey, I'm coming back, he said, F it, I'm going to UCLA. And at the time, as a fan, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Bo Nix is coming back for another. Bro, graduate already. We want Dante Moore. We want him to come get in the system, start getting reps, playing, blah, blah, blah. You know, all roads lead back to Eugene. So I'm happy to see him back, as a Duck quarterback, hopefully to be the leader of that future. And we'll see, what Dylan Gabriel does this year. I'm not super sold on his arm, but then also Austin Novosad. He's in this quarterback room is so good. And ultimately you're going to lose one of those guys between Moore and Novosad. I think they're both so talented. They'll end up going somewhere else to play college football, provided who actually wins that starting position. But you brought in, oh my goodness, what's his name? The wide receiver from Alabama, Gary Bryant Jr. You've got Jurion Dickey, who was the number one. He was a top 5 wide receiver in the country 2 years ago. He's coming up. He's a freak as well. You've got Trayshawn Holden. You got Tez Johnson. There's offense is exciting. So, man, I'm just nerding out. I love my Ducks. I'm excited for them. I could see a loss to Ohio State making sense, but my gut's telling me they got it.
One thing when we're going to talk about Dante Moore, we should also talk about Dylan Raiola. I see the pathway that happened when Dante Moore, he saw the tea leaves and said, look, I'm not going to start at Oregon. So I'm going to go to UCLA, start as a freshman. That doesn't mean I'm locked in for 4 or 5 years at UCLA. And after 1 year, he left UCLA to go to Oregon. I think a very similar thing could happen with Dylan Raiola at Nebraska, where he uses Nebraska to get on the field. He's happy. Matt Rule is really happy because he gets a quarterback that's really good to start. And then Dylan Raiola, after a year or two, realizes, I'm better than this. I'm going to go somewhere that's got better talent around me, that's more fun, and I can win even more games. I would not be shocked if the Dante Moore trajectory is exactly what happens with Dylan Raiola at Nebraska as well.
You make a very valid point.
Let's talk about Penn State, man. I've got Penn State going 10-2, and it's very clear and direct. They lose to USC at USC. They lose to Ohio State. Everyone else in their schedule is fairly a lot of winnable games to me. They've never been able to overcome Ohio State under James Franklin. I'm not a huge believer of Drew Aller. Drew Aller was wildly unimpressive and often very frustrating. He didn't throw a lot of interceptions. People will rant and rave. He had 3 interceptions last year. I'm like, dude, he didn't throw the ball downfield. He didn't do anything. Of course he wasn't throwing picks. He was so conservative. The defense is great, man, at Penn State. It really is. But they're going to lose to USC and Ohio State. They lose to Ohio State every time, and they don't have the firepower to compete with the offense at USC. It's very cut and dry to me. There's not a lot of conversation that needs to be had. They're a great football team that's going to underachieve because of their quarterback, and they're going to go 10-2, in my opinion. What say you?
I think I'm a little bit higher on Drew Aller than you are. I'm going to defer to you as the quarterback expert between the two of us and say that probably makes the most sense. They did bring in a strong receiver in Julian Fleming. Hopefully that can help Aller get rid of the ball. But that defense is still very, very strong, and I think is going to keep them in a lot of games. They're going to be a scary team. This is what I was alluding to with both the SEC and the Big Ten. Because these conferences have gotten so big, we are truly seeing the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. If you're at a bottom tier Big Ten school, You play well one year, you transfer up to one of the big dogs, right? It's kind of strange how that's happening. It's almost looking like Premier League soccer, where if you're an up and coming star, you know, and then all of a sudden Manchester United calls and they want you and they pay you a bag, now you're all of a sudden you're moved up, right? So we're seeing we're seeing everybody get top heavy. So if you don't have Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon on your schedule, then the rest of your schedule isn't that tough. And same goes for SEC. Like once you get out of that top 3 or 4 teams, nobody's really that great. So it's going to give way to a lot of great records this year, which excites me about this college football playoff. You're going to see a lot of good teams in there, but you're going to find out quickly who the great teams are.
Yeah, these teams, Purdue, Minnesota, Maryland, Wisconsin, Illinois, these teams at the middle to lower level, the Big Ten, just aren't very good. And they have no hope of getting better. They don't have the money to compete. They don't have the talent to compete. It's really the haves and have-nots of college football in the Big Ten and the SEC, frankly. Like a team like Vanderbilt or Maryland is never to compete with the Georgias or the Ohio States of the world. It's just never going to happen. They don't have the money or resources to do that.
And it's only getting worse.
How about USC, man? I've got USC going 9-3. Their 3 losses are LSU week 1, Michigan at Michigan, and then Notre Dame at the end of the year. 9-3 could be 10-2. I'm open to that. But I think 9-3, even if the losses are different, like maybe they beat Notre Dame, they probably lose a game somewhere along their way anyway, whether that's Penn State or Washington or, I mean, I don't know who else could beat them. Nebraska, maybe. I don't know. I think 9-3 is accurate. I don't trust USC. I like Lincoln Riley. He's a great developer of NFL quarterbacks. What has he done though? Like when has he ever really delivered in a meaningful moment in college football? He's been to the college football playoffs. He's never got it done. He's got a quarterback I like, Miller Moss.
Got blown out actually, and then
he got what?
So it got blown out in those appearances in the college football playoff. Like it wasn't close.
No. And I think that in the Big Ten, it's just, I don't know. Again, like Penn State is not a threat to them really because of the quarterback situation. Minnesota, Maryland, Rutgers, all these, they play a lot of these crappy Big Ten teams, but against the big boys, Michigan and LSU, I don't think they compete. And if USC ever has to play a team like Ohio State, it's going to get ugly fast, in my opinion. Especially because of their how do I say this? They're so frustrating up front. Like they get beat so often in the trenches at USC. It's not a very tough program, in my opinion. And you're playing now in a really tough Big Ten.
No.
What do you make of all this?
I think that we're going to see a team similar to what we did last year with a slightly better defense. You're going to see an offense that's capable of scoring 60 and probably needs to score 60 to win games, and a defense that's giving up more touchdowns than they should. And because of that, other teams are going to be able to stay in games that they have no business being in. So a team like Nebraska, to me, a team like Notre Dame, who's not going to be spectacular offensively. Who else is on their schedule?
Washington.
A team like Washington, who I think is also going to be regressing. They're going to keep some teams in games that have no business being in the game, and that is going to cause major problems. And then you alluded to it earlier, they're not Big Ten or SEC big up front yet. They're still a couple years away from having the bodies to be able to compete at that top of the top level. Again, offense is going to score points, no doubt about that. But when the offense isn't clicking, can your defense make any plays to keep you in games? I don't think so. And then on the flip side, the defense is probably keeping other teams in games.
To further make your point, they beat Colorado 48-41 last year. Like that should not have been a 7-point game against Colorado. But that's what USC is, man. They score a ton of points and can't play defense to save their lives. You're right. It might be better, but like, man, it's going to catch up to them at some point, like it always does. I think it will this year. What do you make of that Michigan game? USC at Michigan.
I think they win that.
You think they do?
Yeah.
I mean, look, 10, 11 wins isn't unrealistic for USC because of, again, the schedule isn't great. Washington's not as good. Nebraska is
So
still
weird.
building. 11 wins isn't crazy for USC, but they got to take care of business. The question again, though, is where do they slip up? They always do at some point. Lincoln Riley teams do. I don't know, man. I think I'm comfortable at 9-3. How do you feel about USC's 9-3 record?
I'm having a hard time. It could be 9-3. It could be 7-5, but then it could also be, I don't know, 11-1. It just depends on how that defense shows up. I'm going to err on the side of being a 9-win team. I do think that makes sense. And Coach Riley is a great coach. He typically wins the games that he is supposed to. So I'm going to give him the nod in kind of those games that maybe might go the other way. But I think, actually, I got to give them 10 wins because I do have them beating Michigan over you. So 10-2 for the Trojans.
Somehow we talked about USC for a whole segment, and we haven't even brought up Zachariah Branch, their sophomore, explosive, incredible athlete. Like, we can't talk about USC and not bring up what could be the most explosive player in the country,
Electric.
Zachariah Branch.
A Tavon Austin, a DeAnthony Thomas, a Reggie Bush type. Put the ball in his hands and let him do magic. That's the name of the game with this dude.
Oh, yeah, dude. When we talk about USC, these big games they've got, this guy could make the difference so many times throughout the year. I mean, he alone could be the difference between a 9-3 season and an 11-1 season. He's that explosive, and he's a Heisman candidate, I think, honestly. Like, the last non-quarterback to win the Heisman is Devontae Smith. Zachariah Branch could do that, man. He could be a guy who, as a non-quarterback, wins a Heisman, in my opinion, honestly. Especially when you look around college football, how many quarterbacks really are there that were like, that's a clear Heisman favorite? I'm not really sure there are. Carson Beck, like Dylan Gabriel,
it is
Cameron
a soft
Ward.
year.
Like, this could be the year of a non-quarterback, and it could be Zachariah Branch, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know if I could see that happening because I think that Will Rogers will steal that spotlight. You would need to see.
You mean Miller Moss?
Miller Moss. Yes. We were just talking about UW. That's why. Miller Moss, I think, could end up stealing that highlight because he's Lincoln Riley, and because Lincoln Riley's known for, quarterbacks and Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, that lineage of quarterbacks from him. So I think he'd end up stealing that spotlight. But if you start seeing, a few kick returns and a few punt returns, plus catching a few screens and making some big plays, then I think it's an opportunity. But he's got to have probably 4+ special teams touchdowns for that to be a conversation.
I want to also acknowledge Woody Marks, the transfer running back from Mississippi State. He's going to help the offense a lot. And then on top of that, you may not know this, Matt Entz is the linebackers coach of USC. Do you know where he coached before this? Matt Entz? Do you have any idea?
I do not.
He was the head coach of the North Dakota State Bison. He won 2 national titles and left a head coaching job to be the linebackers coach at USC. I assume for a lot more money, a bigger opportunity, more fun. Pretty rare. One of your assistant coaches was a head coach last year and has won multiple national titles, went to 3 as a head coach of a lower division program. Kind of a rare, interesting move to me. Matt Entz leaving North Dakota State to be linebackers coach at USC. It's like, man, I almost wonder if they're grooming the guy to become their defensive coordinator down the road. I mean, and maybe for his sake, he's like, hey, I want to get to the higher ranks of college football. I don't want to just be a D1 AA coach forever. This is my path to being head coach of a big time D1 program. Maybe that's why he made that move. I don't know, but it's fascinating and kind of a unique, rare move to see that kind of change happen.
Very rare move. And I don't think it's grooming to be, the defensive coordinator there. I think that he's just looking for that stepping stone. Let me get in with USC. Let me help this defense play well. And then let me go take a head coaching gig somewhere else and then keep growing from there. So I don't know who gets fired, but I don't doubt that he would be a candidate that comes to the top of a list.
This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. And Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app. Use Prize Picks while watching NFL games this fall, because making picks makes watching games more engaging, and you could turn something like $5 into $50. Prize Picks offers quick and easy deposits. You can even use Apple Pay. So put your skills to the test in daily fantasy. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/CLNS using code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy made easy. I've got the Washington Huskies going, it's ugly, 6-6 this year. They have a new head coach. They've got a new quarterback. They've got 5 new offensive linemen. They're going to the Big Ten. It's pretty brutal, man. I think everything that could go against Washington will. It doesn't mean the future of their program is screwed. Maybe in a couple of years they're in a different spot. But Jed Fish is a new head coach. Will Rogers is a new quarterback from Mississippi State. 5 new offensive linemen is really concerning to me. I've got Washington losing to, believe it or not, Washington State, Michigan, Iowa, USC, Penn State, and Oregon. Look, give or take a win. It could be 7-5, not 6-6. It could also be 5-7. I mean, I really, I'm really not confident in what's going on with Washington. It's not a knock against them. It's just the task ahead of them is really tough. New quarterback, new coach, brand new program, new conference, everything. What do you make of all that?
Yeah, I think all of those things plus a shit recruiting class. We know that Kalen DeBoer was not a great recruiter. He benefited from Jimmy Lake, who's now in the NFL as a defensive coordinator, having great recruiting classes. Like Kalen DeBoer didn't get there and have to develop a bunch of talent. He just needed to be a better leader of men than Jimmy Lake was at the University of Washington. Then you bring in Michael Penix, you have Roma Dunes, you have Jalen McMillan, you have Jalen Polk, all guys who were drafted, plus Ryan Grubb, a strong offensive coordinator. You were able to win games immediately. And as soon as you didn't have that, he hit the road to Alabama to go find some more. So I think that Jed Fish did a great job at Arizona. They had a lot of great momentum to close out the year last year. I just don't see, like you said, the task is too tall. I don't see them winning a lot of games just because they're not going to have the talent. And they're going to be new. I think that Jed Fish will get them moving in the right direction, and hopefully be able to build a strong recruiting class and get the guys in there that he needs to. But he's going to have to do that pretty quick through the transfer portal. I don't think it happens this year. 5 or 6 wins for this University of Washington team. I also hate the Huskies. I'd love to see them win only 3 games. Last time they went to the national championship, I think the following year they might have lost every game. Who knows?
Yeah, I also wonder how long Jed Fish would stay at Washington. Like, leaving Arizona was kind of weird. You finally did well, and you jumped to a program that I guess is a slight step up. But how big of a step up from Arizona to Washington are you really taking? I mean, I don't know, man. What's easier to recruit to, Washington, a Big Ten school, or a Big 12 Arizona? I really don't know. I mean, that's crazy to say, but I don't think Washington's one of these. It's not a Nebraska. It's not a Michigan. It's not an Oregon. It's not even, I don't know what category you put them in, but Washington to me isn't a top tier college football program. They might think they are, and maybe Jed Fish thinks they are, but to me, it's not a destination. I don't think there's passion in Seattle for football the way you're going to see in other parts of the country. Oregon's an outlier to me. I don't know, man.
Their University of Washington is a strong historical football team. You go back to the Rose Bowl and however many thousands of years ago now that they keep bringing up, and I can't get over it. They're historically have a strong fan base, and I think that last year having all of that visibility benefited them. Now, again, if Kalen DeBoer stays, I think that benefited University of Washington even more. That wasn't the case. I think if they wanted to maintain that national brand of today's football and not hang on to the ghost of Christmas past, I think they needed to maybe make a splashier hire or a guy who's been around the SEC or been around the Big Ten to try and make that, leap. And I don't know a ton about Jed Fish, but I'm not sure if he was the hire to do that. Again, not to say that he can't grow this program into a power in the Big Ten, but like you said, task is tall. And it is tough to recruit guys out to Seattle. It's raining. You've been there.
Oh, I went to college in Tacoma. Hiring Jed Fish stunk of desperation to me. It's a team that lost their coach, heading into a new conference, and said, we'll just pay this guy a ton of money. He's succeeding at Arizona, kind of a panic hire almost. Like, what else can we do? Let's throw a lot of money at this guy, basically.
Yeah.
I'm just not real confident in the future of Washington, and I'm willing to be proven wrong. I've got an open mind. Maybe it's great. Maybe Will Rogers like leads the country in passing and they look amazing. I'm open to that, but I'm going to stay pat at 6-6 for the Washington Huskies this year. I feel pretty comfortable with that.
I'm going to say 4 wins.
Really? 4-8.
I hate the Huskies. 4 wins. 4-8.
Are you ready to get controversial? Are you ready to have kind of an argument, man?
Let's talk about it.
Okay. Are you sure? This is going to be a really interesting one. I have got the Miami Hurricanes going 11-1. And I know you're going to push back. Here's our schedule. Florida A&M, Ball State, South Florida, Virginia Tech, Cal, Louisville, Florida State, Duke, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, and Syracuse. Pull up their schedule, look at it, familiarize yourself. To me, their only loss is Florida State. And I feel really comfortable with that. If they can beat Florida week 1, it gets real easy from there on out. Their schedule is incredibly light at Miami. I think they could like really kind of fail their way to an 11-win season for real. They've got a quarterback who I absolutely love, Cameron Ward.
Cannot.
They've got a running back transfer from Oregon State, Damian Martinez. I don't love Mario Cristobal at all. In fact, I'm very critical of him. I thought he did a disservice to Justin Herbert at Oregon.
He did.
But I don't think they need to be great to go 11-1. I mean, I really think their schedule is that easy. What do you make of everything I just said?
He had a quarterback like Cam Ward at the University of Oregon named Anthony Brown Jr., mobile guy who can throw the rock, not a super stellar arm, but, can throw it.
Oh, no. Let's be very clear. I'm gonna cut you off. I have to. Cameron Ward is the most underrated guy in all of college football. I don't mind saying that. I don't mind cutting off anybody. I'll scream that from the mountaintops. No one has paid attention. I watched him live at Washington State. He's incredible. He's like a Heisman Trophy candidate, in my opinion.
I'm happy. I'm so happy for him. Guess who was also a Heisman Trophy candidate last year? At the University of Miami. I'm actually blanking on his name right now. This is really embarrassing. Yeah, he was a Heisman candidate to start the year. What happened to him? Where's he even at now? Now you bring in Cam Ward. My point is that I'm very happy for Cam Ward. I'm very happy he's underrated. But you are going to a head coach that is going to minimize everything good about your game and turn you into this vanilla, I don't even know. Like, you're losing to Florida for sure. You're losing to USF. You're losing to Virginia Tech. You're losing to Louisville. You're losing to Florida State. It's going to be on the fence with Duke. You choked against Georgia Tech last year. You probably lose against we were talking about coaches to get fired, like between Brett Venables and Billy Napier. Mario Cristobal is right there. The jig is up, bro. You benefited from the University of Oregon recruiting system and being able to bring in excellent talent. There's a lot of coaches that can coach the University of Oregon to a 9-10 win team. And let's not talk about one of your Pac-12 titles is completely false during that COVID year where you lost, I can't even remember how many games, but because a team couldn't actually play in the Pac-12 championship, you got to go. Mario Cristobal is just so into his vanilla scheme. Oh, we're going to run tough rumble football. It is so bad. It is embarrassing to watch. He gets fired. This team maybe wins 5 games this year. Despite Cam Ward and despite how great Cam Ward might be, you're running the ball to maintain 100-yard rusher streak instead of just taking a knee and walking out with a win. That is so asinine to me as a head coach. Your job is to win football games, not try and break records. Do the bare minimum first, bro. And he did it at the University of Oregon too. Now you're starting to see a little bit of the bias show here for, again, him minimizing Justin Herbert and just making everything about Oregon football that was so flashy and fun so bland and boring and embarrassing to watch. We got body bagged by Utah like 2 or 3 times in a row for absolutely no reason when we were, when the University of Oregon was a better team. Like, this guy's just not a good coach. Great recruiter, great at selling the sauce, but he is just a horrible coach. With him, you cannot luck your way into 11 wins.
Here is where,
Thank you.
so thanks for the TED Talk. I appreciate it. I was historically wrong about Justin Herbert coming out of college. I was really down on him because I watched him for years make the same mistakes for years and not progress. And I always wondered, I couldn't figure out like what's going on with Justin Herbert. He's so talented, but he's missing easy throws. He's making bad decisions. He's not being put in a great spot to succeed. And we learned the minute Justin Herbert got to the NFL, oh, the reason I was wrong, he had bad coaching. Oh man. And I was actually kind of pissed because Mario Cristobal made me look like a freaking idiot on the internet criticizing Justin Herbert. I thought he was getting a fair shake with good coaching. He wasn't. Cameron Ward sold the farm, in my opinion. Cameron Ward, borderline, I think sold out is kind of the word, actually. He was getting pursued by Florida State, Ohio State, and Miami. And he was frustrated by how much money Florida State and Ohio State were throwing at him. And I think that's incredibly short-sighted. He put his football career and his development as a quarterback behind immediate money he was able to get. Look, man, Cameron Ward with Chip Kelly and the offense at Ohio State would have been easy national title, easy Heisman Trophy, incredible for your progression as a quarterback. He's like, we're talking about Cameron Ward as the number one pick of the draft. Instead, he wanted more money up front and went to Miami, where the coaching's not going to be as good. The talent around him isn't as good. I'm still excited. I think Cameron Ward, I really, truly, I'm a Cameron Ward truther. I will be forever. He's incredibly, incredibly underrated. He can throw, he can run. He makes Patrick Mahomes level plays all the time. Like all this attention Caleb Williams got in the Pac-12, Cameron Ward was doing that for years at Washington State, and no one even noticed. It was crazy to me. But to me, and I know that because I went there and I'm pretty close to that program, I'm a huge believer of Cameron Ward. He made a terrible decision career-wise by going to Miami rather than Ohio State. I don't care if Ohio State wasn't going to pay you at all. You take the opportunity to play for an incredible Ohio State program with great talent around you and Chip Kelly and look forward to the NFL. He wanted the instant gratification and the short-sighted plan to make more money at Miami. All that being said, so I've got deep frustration with Mario Cristobal. I still go back to this, man. Damon Martinez, the running back from Oregon State, transferred in. Mario Cristobal is a coach that's flawed, but I love Cameron Ward, the quarterback. I really, really, really believe this is an 11-1 football team. I just look Florida, Florida A&M, Ball State, South Florida, Virginia Tech, Cal, Louisville. The only one that even brings a question to me is Duke. I think you're going to lose to Florida State. You might lose to Duke. We're looking at a 10 or 11 win season for Miami, and I feel very, very strong in that. You don't agree, but man, you're telling me Syracuse takes down Miami? Look at their schedule. It's really easy. I mean, I just can't imagine. They've got better talent across the board, how they fail their way. And maybe I'm giving Mario Cristobal too much credit. That's very possible. And I just think this is a 10-win, 11-win year for Miami, given what they have, given the schedule they're playing against. What say you?
Let me take off my Oregon hat again. I realized how much bias was coming through for the poor job that he did at the University of Oregon. He made a good hire this offseason. He hired the offensive coordinator from the University of Houston, a guy who, Houston had put up some great numbers back, especially when they had Tank Dell at wide receiver. Like, they were no joke. Now, if Mario Cristobal can let some of his ego and pride go and allow, Shannon Dawson to take over the offense and stop trying to play big boy SEC. We're going to run it. We're going to be vanilla, play action. If he can let Shannon Dawson just work with Cam Ward and be dynamic as possible, I could see a 10-win season. But anything more than that, I just think that Cristobal is going to get in the way of the team. That's just how I feel.
To me, their offensive line is going to be really good. They've got, again, that guy, David Martinez, man, was an incredible running back last year at Oregon State. He's going to be a bell cow running back for them. And then you can call vanilla stuff for Cameron Ward, but he's going to make so many plays outside of structure where the pocket breaks down. He gets outside of the pocket and makes something happen on the perimeter, running or throwing or extending a play. I'm telling you, Cameron Ward's going to make a lot of plays that are not called, where he's just going to do stuff that and do all kinds of literally like I've seen this guy convert 3rd and 32 for a touchdown. Like he just finds a way with so many bad things in front of him to make a play happen. And the schedule is so light at Miami. I really do think this is an 11-win football team. I'm willing to be wrong. What's going to be interesting is if I am wrong, and frankly, let's acknowledge if Miami doesn't go 11-1, it's a massive underachievement, in my opinion. What's going to be fun is analyzing what went wrong, why I was wrong. If they don't go 11-1, well, what's going to break down over the season that's going to cause that to happen? And if they don't go 11-1, Mario Cristobal's got to pay because they got a great bunch of guys there. The Jimmy Joes are there. The playmakers are there, but you got to deliver on the coaching end. So to me, pressure's on, but there's no reason that Miami Hurricanes shouldn't go 11-1 this year.
I mean, I feel like I just listed about 800 reasons that they shouldn't go 11-1. To me, yeah, if they don't look like a halfway decent team and they just sputter the same way that they did last year, just get Cristobal out of there. Just go back to being an offensive line coach. I can't do it anymore.
Yeah. The Clemson Tigers, I've got them going 10-2 this year. Which surprised me, actually. I went through their schedule. You know, to me, I don't just pick a number. I go through wins and losses, then I count it up at the end. Last year, Clemson went 9-4, and 3 of those losses were one-score games. They got blown out week 1 against Duke. To me, they're lost. They lose week 1 to Georgia, clearly and by a mile.
Yep.
Then their only other loss this year is on the road at Florida State, October 5th. Look at the rest of their schedule. Appalachian State, North Carolina State, Stanford, Wake Forest, Virginia, Louisville, Virginia Tech, Pittsburgh, the Citadel, and then an SEC program, South Carolina. We're looking at a really easy 10, maybe 9-win season if you lose to South Carolina. The truth about the ACC is it's Clemson, Miami, and I guess Notre Dame. Like there's nothing in that conference. There's so much garbage. There's so many bad football teams. I'm not a huge fan of Dabo Swinney, man. Dabo Swinney is not evolving with college football. Clemson historically does not use a transfer portal. I think what's going to happen is Clemson is going to kind of fake their way to a 10-win season. They're going to be 10-2. Then they're going to go to the college football playoff and get spanked and get embarrassed when they play a real football team. But I think they do get back to the college football playoff this year because of how easy their schedule is. And it's going to make people really consider, hey, these ACC programs we're letting into the college football playoff really don't play anyone all year. I think the 10 wins are going to be inflated when you really consider, hey, a team like Texas, a team like Tennessee that maybe is a 9 or 8-win team played a way tougher schedule than a team like Clemson, even though they got a better record in the end. And I'm not a big believer in Cade Klubnik, the quarterback at Clemson. He's been very vanilla. He's not a great athlete. He's not a big playmaker. I'm just not a fan of Clemson, but I think they kind of fake their way to a 10-win season. What do you make of all that?
Yeah, I think you're going to see a Clemson team that we've seen over, the last, 10 years. Maybe even going back further than that, back to your Taj Boyds, Deshaun Watson, into Trevor Lawrence. Talk about an incredible quarterback run that Dabo Swinney had. I know he had a couple of rough years in there, I think with like Kelly Bryant and maybe a few other cats. But Clemson last year had one of the best defenses in college football. Granted, let's do some adjusting to the ACC, right? Not necessarily playing against the best teams, but Clemson was a relatively solid a very solid defensive team last year. I think only Michigan, according to Google, what I have up here, according to PFF, had a better defense. Again, adjusted for the ACC. If Cade Klubnik can develop and take another step, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. This team has 10 or 11 wins, and then they show up and they play an SEC or a Big Ten team, and they can't measure up. I honestly don't know a lot about Clemson, and to me, it's hard to tell how good they are from year to year because there's been times where it's been like this, where they are a top-tier team. They look great. They're running through the ACC. And then they get to the college football playoff, right? And you have Deshaun Watson and or Trevor Lawrence, and they're just blowing people out of the water, right? Like generational talents. Cade Klubnik is not that guy, in my opinion. So I'm not sure what else they have around him offensively to be better than, a college football playoff appearance and then, maybe a first round bounce.
Yeah, the defense to me is really questionable because I think their numbers are very much inflated by the schedule they play. I'm really comfortable saying Clemson's 10-2, and then a first round bye immediately out of the college football playoff. They're going to play a real college football team, a Texas, a Tennessee, something like that, and get bounced. And we're going to see, oh yeah, hey, maybe Dabo Swinney should probably evolve with the times and use the transfer portal. Maybe, if you're not going to evolve with college football, like Nick Saban, I think, saw where college football was going and said, I don't want to do this, man. I'm good. I'm old. I'm tired. I had my success.
Yeah.
I think Dabo Swinney is going to, at some point, frustrate Clemson fans where they're going to look, man, you're not winning anymore. You're not doing what you used to do because you're not making the changes necessary to keep up with everybody else.
Yeah.
The lack of transfer portal use is crazy to me. Like it's just not healthy. It's not smart. And it's going to catch up to them at Clemson.
Yeah. That Southern charm, let's build this together. This is our team. We're here to build it. Yeah, just the game's changing and he's running out of time.
Okay, do me a favor. Google the Notre Dame Fighting Irish football schedule because I looked at it, man, and I went through every game and I landed on, believe it or not, 12-0. Which I feel very uncomfortable with. I want to be very clear. Like,
yeah, you
12-0 is like, I feel
should be uncomfortable with it.
Man, but I love Riley Leonard, the quarterback who transferred in from Duke. They've got a really, really good defense. Notre Dame went 10-3 last year. Their schedule is easy. The question marks are, hey, Texas A&M at Texas A&M week 1. They play Florida State on November 9th, and they play USC November 30th at USC. So maybe it's 9-3 instead of 12-0. I'm comfortable with that conversation. But to me, man, there's a lot of bad teams on their schedule, a lot of winnable games. I think their defense really is elite. It's one of the best in college football. I really like Riley Leonard. And you look at the games they play. So Texas A&M, right? What do they do better than Notre Dame? Do they have a better defense? No. Do they have a better quarterback? No. What about Florida State? Do they have a better defense? Do they have a better quarterback? No. I mean, I think Florida State's a toss-up. I think USC is a toss-up. So 10-2, 12-0, something like that. But I think we're looking at a really, really good year for Notre Dame because of the strength of schedule. What do you make of
that? To me, they lose to Texas A&M. I think they lose to Louisville. I think they lose to Florida State. Virginia's a toss-up, and then they definitely lose to Southern Cal. I think last year was just the tip of the iceberg as far as the regression for Notre Dame. You brought in Sam Hartman. You thought, oh, he's going to be the savior on offense. Keep this thing moving forward. He didn't turn out to be spectacular. And in fact, probably went from a first-round draft pick to a guy that, I can't remember where he ended up getting drafted.
Undrafted to Washington.
Undrafted. Yeah, undrafted to Washington. So again, you had a guy that was looking to be like he was going to be a first rounder after absolutely lighting it up at Wake Forest the year before, to all of a sudden he's not even in the conversation. That to me is scary. Again, the defense could be good. Marcus Freeman, the former defensive coordinator, he's got that right. But the offense to me just looks so abysmal. The games that they won last year were still very contested games. I don't think they truly, truly blew anyone out. And maybe I'm wrong there. I'm not a big Notre Dame fan. But to me, I don't see this team getting any better. I don't see Marcus Freeman making any splashy moves, getting any new recruits in the building. I just see more regression. It's hard to win at Notre Dame. It's hard to get into the school. South Bend isn't a great place to be. It's snowy. It's cold. It's a private school. Like, it's not as easy as going to Alabama or even going somewhere like Arizona where it's hot all the time and the parties are amazing. Like, you have to. That's why I have so much faith in Brian Kelly at LSU. I know this is a little bit of a side tangent, but he could win there. Now, again, you're a couple years removed from Brian Kelly. What does this team look like? To me, they didn't look consistent. They didn't look like they were coached well. And I just don't think that the cat from Duke, Riley Leonard, is going to be the guy to make the difference. It's going to be just like last year. You bring in a guy, you're expecting him to lead this team, microwave bake a a starting quarterback, and I just don't think that's the solve.
Well, here's where I'll push back. Sam Hartman and Riley Leonard are not the same conversation when it comes to being an athlete. Sam Hartman, I love him, had a limited arm. He's like a fun guy. He's handsome. We like him, like very likable. Very much not a great athlete. Very much not going to run people over. Riley Leonard, he's a massive dude who runs people over. He can run. He can throw. He's got way more potential as a player than Sam Hartman ever had. Here's my question to you. So you think Florida State leaves the state of Florida, where it's warm in November, to go to South Bend, Indiana, and beats Notre Dame in South Bend at Notre Dame November 9th?
Yep. Whoops their ass.
Really? You think Florida State takes care of business by a lot against Notre Dame?
Off of nothing but vibes. Yeah, I think they go in there and they whoop their ass.
Okay, so I'm comfortable to then take a win away from Notre Dame. We'll say they're going to go 11-1. But then the consequence of that is Florida State wins one more game than I had before. So Florida State goes from 9-3 to 10-2.
I love it.
Okay. Well, then let's put it in stone. I'm comfortable saying Notre Dame's going to go 11-1. The USC game makes me nervous. I guess if we do that, 10-2, because I think, look, man, here's my question. At the end of the year, with a great defense or a great offense, who's better, Notre Dame or USC?
USC.
Okay. So USC goes 10-2 and Notre Dame goes 10-2.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I have Notre Dame personally losing more games than that.
Sure.
But yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Then I'll correct the record. I've got Notre Dame going 10-2. They lose to Florida State and USC. You can talk me into it. I think they beat Texas A&M week 1. Texas A&M and the new coach. I don't know, man. That's an interesting one. 10-2 could be 9-3 if they lose to A&M.
To College Station. You're going to College Station. You've got a new quarterback. You've got a coach that, whether we want to say it or not, is feeling the pressure. Not only as a coach, taking over for a guy like Brian Kelly, but this is something that's big for an African-American coach at the University of Notre Dame. It's not traditionally something that happens. He is going to be feeling the heat.
I just think they win, man.
If they're not winning, it is a serious problem.
Yeah, I think they got a better quarterback, a better defense. It's interesting. I know it's the SEC. I know it's A&M. I think Notre Dame wins that game. I mean, I can't wait to find out. August 31st, 10 days from now, we'll find out who's right. It's going to be really interesting.
And again, Texas A&M has been so talented for so many years, regardless of what Jimbo Fisher was doing and regardless of the other head coaches. They just need somebody to get these guys moving in the right direction. They do not need a lot to all of a sudden be a very good football team.
Okay. Let's talk about Florida State. I have Florida State going 10-2. Their 2 losses. They lose to Duke at Duke. And then I've actually got them losing to SMU. It's a conversation. I think their schedule is really easy. Florida State. I think Florida State 10-2 is like really safe and conservative. This could be 12-0. You look at Florida State's schedule: Georgia Tech, Boston College, Memphis, Cal, SMU, Clemson, Duke, Miami, North Carolina, Notre Dame, Charleston Southern, and Florida. They're better than Florida. They're better than Miami. They are better than Clemson. They're better coached. They are a better quarterback. They've got a better offensive and defensive line. Florida State's actually really loaded across the board up front. They got a really experienced offensive line. Honestly, to me, I look at Florida State and it really reminds me of the way Oregon State was built last year. And what's funny about that is actually they've even got the same quarterback as Oregon State last year. They've got DJ Uiagalelei as their quarterback who transferred in from Oregon State. But the experienced offensive line really matters. They brought in Malik Benson, their wide receiver from Alabama, who transferred in. I don't love their schedule. I think they do lose games. Maybe the 2 I picked are wrong. I think they are 10-2. Maybe they lose to a Clemson and a Miami instead of a Duke and an SMU. I do think Memphis and SMU are kind of a trap game where it's 2 teams that had good records last year that kept their coach and their quarterback from last year. So I don't know, man. Yeah. They're dangerous to me, but 10-2 feels about right for Florida State. What do you make of all that?
Yeah, I think 10-2 just based off the schedule makes sense. Which two that is to me, it's more than likely Clemson. I just think that Clemson is a tough team to beat. I know that we were just talking about, kind of ACC. Maybe the defense isn't as strong as it looks like, but I do have faith that if they were to lose one of those games, it's definitely going to be to Clemson. And then Florida, I think, is actually kind of a scary game just because we have the anticipation that Billy Napier is going to be out the door. Sometimes when you get a new coach in the middle of the season, you catch some momentum, things in the locker room change and you find some energy. You just played Charleston Southern the week before. Maybe Florida can catch you off guard. But fortunately, you've got them at home, so that kind of takes that pressure off. But yeah, I could see 2 wins. I think a lot of people have been calling kind of for this regression from this Florida State team, and I think that Mike Norvell is a great coach. He's going to have these dudes riding in the right direction.
You said you could see 2 wins. I think you meant, I'm trying to protect you from the audience. I think you meant 2 losses.
Yeah, 2 losses. Audience, schmaudience.
I know. I feel bad. I cut you off sometimes because I'm like, I got to protect Nathan. Like, he's not been doing this very long, and I don't want him to get attacked. I remember when I started, dude, the comments were so hard for me. I don't know if you ever have that, but I'm like, I remember reading all the comments. Full transparency, I haven't looked at YouTube comments in like a year. I like literally don't care at all anymore. But I imagine you read them, and that would be like, I just try to protect you. You're my precious little friend, and I got to keep you safe.
I love to get down in the comments and engage, but here's the deal. For me, we've talked about the football career, that I had. I didn't love my college football career, and that's a part that I'll never be happy about. But all I know is that one of my years at Portland State, we lost every single game. We did not win a game. I essentially rode the bench on that team. Some special teams plays here and there. But when you ride the bench on the worst team in college football, bro, nothing can hurt you after that. It doesn't matter what people say. Dude, stuff just rolls off my back. Like, there's no greater shame in my life than that year. And so anytime people want to hate, talk about this, that, the other, I'm like, bro, come on. You got better things to do than that. And in general, I'm just not a guy that lets stuff get to me personally. There's probably only 2 or 3 people in this world that can really get me upset. One of them is my old man. But yeah, man, just people are going to be people, and you just got to meet them where they're at. And if where they're at is angry at you over the internet for some reason, so be it.
To me, this is now a wild transition, but
so Florida State.
No, actually, like you'll be shocked what I'm about to say. To me, there's one college football program that is like the most interesting team in college football. It's a team I literally cannot wait on a Saturday to sit down. I'll have a really good meal, and I'm going to watch this team play football in a meaningless game. I'm going to watch this team play like TCU or Colorado or Florida or Arizona or BYU, and I'm just going to be really excited. It's actually Central Florida. University of Central Florida. I have them going 7-5. It's not a crazy noteworthy year. 7 wins, 5 losses. It's just, I know it's unremarkable from the outside. To me, what's interesting about Central Florida, the reason they're on this list, yeah, they're moving to the Big 12. Sure, that's tough for them. But it's Gus Malzahn as head coach and KJ Jefferson as their quarterback. KJ Jefferson, the transfer from Arkansas, who is basically like, he's like a tight end playing quarterback. I mean, he's a massive dude who can throw a little bit, who can run like Cameron Newton, man. He's a fullback or something.
Don't say Cam Newton. Don't say Cam
Dude,
Newton. No,
I
it's
said
impossible.
Cameron Newton. Okay, he's Kyle Juszczyk playing quarterback. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's Peyton Hillis. He's this massive dude who runs with power between the tackles, and he's got Gus Malzahn calling plays, who, by the way, was Cameron Newton's coach when they won a national title. He was the guy designing the offense Cam Newton looked so successful in at Auburn. I can't wait to see what they do running the football. Like, the former coach in me, the football nerd in me, acknowledges Central Florida is not going to have a great year. They're probably not going to finish as a top 25 team, but they're going to be so much fun to watch if you're a football nerd. If you like X's and O's and run schemes, I think we're going to see so many like Dan Casey clips. Did you see what Central Florida did on this random game on Saturday? They ran like a toss. They ran a jet toss, lead block or something like that. Like, there's going to be so much, like, we're going to see all kinds of like veer style offensive play call, like triple option stuff from the spread. It's going to be so interesting and creative. I can't wait to see what Gus Malzahn does with a quarterback like KJ Jefferson. I really do. I just think it's going to be fun and interesting. I've got him losing to TCU, Colorado, Cincinnati, Iowa State, and Utah. Utah by a lot, actually. They do beat Arizona in my estimation. I don't know where we go with this. I think they win at Florida, which is kind of the shock of the year, probably to everyone. In fact, if Florida loses to Central Florida on October 5th, that's the end of Billy Napier's career, like straight up. Like, he's going to get out immediately from Florida. And maybe 100%. Central Florida does that. I don't expect you to say a lot here. I know I'm kind of this unique person on an island paying attention to Central Florida, but I really, for real, I'm going to watch them play BYU and Florida and Colorado because I just find the X's and O's of this team interesting. Do you have anything you want to respond with? It's okay if I'm alone and the only person interested in this team.
I just don't know anything about UCF this year. What I do know is that KJ Jefferson at Arkansas almost lost to Portland State University. I saw a good friend of mine, Davis Alexander, outplay him. He's now the starting quarterback for the Montreal Alouettes. Shout out Davis. I don't know anything about UCF, so happy for them. It sounds like it's going to be exciting, but let's not compare this guy to Cameron Newton quite yet.
No. Let's say it's Peyton Hillis playing quarterback. Remember Peyton Hillis, the old Browns running back? Like,
yeah.
Or Kyle Juszczyk, the fullback of the 49ers, right? He's a fullback playing quarterback. It's just, for me, it's like fascinating. He's going to run like a wildcat offense. He's going to throw the ball a little bit, and it's going to be really interesting, like from a football perspective. Like the football nerd in me cannot wait, and I want access to their film as quickly as possible. Like, I just can't wait to break down what they're doing. It's going to be so interesting.
If you added like 30 pounds of muscle to Joe Milton, that's what KJ Jefferson is. Just, you know what I mean? And like,
come on, Joe Milton's got a way better arm than KJ Jefferson. Don't disrespect Joe Milton that much.
That wasn't disrespect. I was talking purely body type. That's what you got. Here's also a small note in there. You mentioned Dan Casey. Guys, if you're not following Dan Casey on either Twitter, Instagram, whatever, give him a follow. He's got excellent breakdowns. It will help you sound more like a knowledgeable football person just watching his clips. So make sure you tune in, you see what he's got going on, and it'll just make you a little bit higher IQ in the football world.
Dan Casey, guy who texts me frequently, been on the show before. Go listen to my episodes of Strong Opinion Sports. I'm not going to take credit for discovering Dan Casey. That would be wrong. He's killing it. I do think I'm probably one of the first people who had him on a podcast. Like, he was doing his own stuff, and maybe that's even inflammatory. I don't want to discredit him at all. I just remember a long time ago having him on this podcast before he was like on ESPN and in the New York Times. Like, I love the guy so much. He's great. He texted me some advice when I got hired as the offensive coordinator, a job I now don't have begrudgingly. But I love Dan. He's a great guy and also just really, really interesting. And he's a family man. He adopted 2 kids. Like, he's just an awesome dude that you got to love.
Let's get him back on the show. I'll text him right now.
Let's let him get through high school football first, but I bet we could get him in like November for sure. Almost certainly.
I'm also kidding. I don't have his number.
Oh, I do. Ha! I also got, anyway, I'm not going to name drop. Let's talk about Arizona. I've got the Arizona Wildcats going 7-5. It's not a very interesting team to me. The interesting thing about Arizona is their quarterback, Noah Fifita. They brought in Brent Brennan, the head coach formerly of San Jose State University. Arizona scrambled after Jed Fish left. They're in a new conference, the Big 12. It's going to be really ugly, honestly. The interesting thing about Arizona, Tetaroa McMillan, they call him T-Mac. He's a 6'5" Hawaiian stud wide receiver. He's number 4 in Arizona's offense. The dude is electric. He's like one of the best receivers in college football, in my opinion, quietly. No one's even paying attention to him. I don't think Arizona's going to win a lot of games. I got them losing to Kansas State, Utah, Texas Tech, Central Florida, and TCU. And they're in a tougher conference all around, but the quarterback is fun, and their star wide receiver, T-Mac, is incredible. That's all I got. I don't have a lot to say about Arizona.
Yeah.
I just find those two players particularly interesting. Got anything we want to say about them?
Yeah, I think offensively they're going to be able to match up in this Big 12 and score some points. And I think that defensively, I think they just have a little bit of a bigger body size, having been in the Pac 12. And I know that the Pac 12 versus the Big 12 wasn't as big of a difference as you could say the Pac 12 to the SEC is. But I do think they'll benefit from what Jed Fish has left behind. Thankfully, the quarterback stayed, wide receiver stayed. I know he was trying to pull them up to UW with him. So again, offense will be exciting. Defense, I think, will be middle of the pack. But it's interesting that you said that this was an interesting team, but then in your intro to Arizona, said they weren't that interesting of a team.
Oh,
there's just a lot of interestings being thrown around here.
Sure.
Yeah, they'll be all right. 500, a game above 500, I could see that being possible because the Big 12 isn't super strong. I think a lot of their games this year are going to be 50-50 games. You talked about TCU. I know they're one of the more established teams in the Big 12. I still think that Arizona can match up with them. Yeah.
Utah's interesting. Texas Tech is an interesting game. Former quarterback at Oregon, forget his name right now. Who's that guy? He was there 1 year after Herbert. What's his name? Who's that quarterback? Tyler something.
Oh, Tyler Shuck. Tyler Shuck.
Tyler Shuck. He's a quarterback.
Does he still have eligibility?
I believe he is still the quarterback at Texas A&M. Correct.
He's been playing for years.
Or Texas Tech, excuse me.
Actually, he either is or was dating one of my fiance's good friends.
Tyler Shuck is a senior at Louisville. So I'm way off. I'm wrong. He transferred. So he's a Louisville.
Yeah, because he broke his leg, right? And then he transferred out.
Yeah. So anyway, I've got him. I think maybe we're talking 8-4 then. They probably can beat Texas Tech. Arizona. The reason I call them personally interesting to me, right? I think that Noah Fafita is really cool. I think T-Mac is really interesting. There's a couple things about Arizona I personally want to watch, but I also acknowledge from a national standpoint, people that aren't Arizona fans don't care about Arizona. Like no one's going to be in December going, "Oh, I can't. Did you see what Arizona did? They went 8-4 this year. Can you believe it?" Like no one's going to say that. It's just you and me. We're the only people that are like kind of fascinated in some angles there. So they're interesting to me, but they're not interesting on a national stage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Are they? They're ranked 21. In this preseason AP poll, both in the coaches poll and AP poll. So I mean, they're a good team. I shouldn't say they're a good team. They've got talent. They've got potential, and we'll just see how it plays out.
Our last team of the day, and you'll notice like the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, we've kind of gone down the levels of like most interesting to least interesting in college football. But we're ending with a bang. We're ending with a college football program that is very, very polarizing. It's very messy. I don't know what to make of them. I honestly like, I don't even know how to predict how their year is going to go because it could be so many different things. I've got Colorado going 6-6. They're not they went 4-8 last year. It's going to be ugly and interesting. But to me, Colorado's joining the Big 12. They've got Travis Hunter, who I like. Do you need a minute? Is your camera okay? Oh, Jesus. What happened? What did I miss? What just went down?
What do you mean by that?
Jesus Christ.
You work for CBS?
Is this your Deion Sanders? Your camera went away and I couldn't tell what was going on. I was like, man, I don't know.
I just went to grab the sunglasses.
Oh. So again, they went 4-8 last year. 6-6 would be a small improvement. We'll talk about their players, I guess. Colorado's so weird. They lost to Utah by a touchdown. They lost to Arizona by 3 points. They lost to Oregon State by a touchdown. They lost to USC by a touchdown. They went 4-8 last year, but they were shockingly competitive with really good football teams. What do you make of Colorado this year?
Colorado needs to see Shedeur Sanders get rid of the football, whether that is throwing it away or just simply letting it fly when the read is there. They need to see their offensive line protect better, and they just needed more depth. They simply did not have enough guys that could play at a high enough level to compete throughout this year, and that's why you saw them start to fade at the end of the year. And in those second halves of games, where they could have pulled away, they didn't, and where they folded, they did. So, provided this team gets more depth, quarterback play gets a little better in terms of protecting himself and the rest of the team by throwing away the football and not getting behind the chains, and this defense can play a little bit better, they'll be competitive in the Big 12. I don't want to say that they are going to be, a leader to win the Big 12, but there's certainly a chance that, they're up there towards the end. I think 7 wins is a minimum and a must for Deion Sanders this year. But yeah, they're going to be a solid team. And fortunately, the Big 12 plays out for them not to have to be super duper physical. They're going to be good. They've got a lot of guys who know how to coach football on that coaching staff under Deion, and I'm excited to see the result. I know that he can rub people the wrong way, and he can be polarizing, and people certainly feel a certain way about him. But I am cautiously optimistic for this Colorado football team.
Yeah, the reports coming out of camp basically have been, dude, it's horror stories. Players leaving and transferring upset, talk of all kinds of just, I don't even want to say the words exactly. You're spreading rumors, but messy stuff going on in the dorms, misconduct happening. It just seems like there's a lack of discipline there. I don't know what to make of it. Honestly, I really can't get a read. Yeah. I love Deion Sanders. I really like him. I want him to succeed. I want to see Colorado do well. I remember watching Colorado beat Texas, TCU last year, and it was the most fun I had. It was the best, opening to the college football season we could have possibly asked for. It was such a fun game.
Yeah.
Then from that point on, it just
that 4-0 start was crazy.
Oh yeah. So
I think Oregon kind of let them know what it was like.
Yeah, they lost to Oregon 42-6. It was a wake-up call for sure. I just, do you think I have 6-6 for Colorado. I have them, their losses are to Colorado State, Kansas State, Arizona, Texas Tech, Utah, and Kansas. That means they're going to beat Nebraska, North Dakota State, Baylor, Central Florida. Any one of these games could be, you could flip, Colorado State, maybe you lose to Nebraska instead. I think 6-6, just based on their team, they're going to lose 6 games and win 6. I don't care which 6 you give. Could they be a 10-win team? Is there potential for way better than that? I think the offensive line is a huge concern. I've got concerns about the defensive line. I love Travis Hunter, I love Shedeur Sanders, but can a couple great skill players carry a team beyond 6 wins? I'm not sure.
I'm not too sure either. And I think it depends on what version of Utah we see in the Big 12. We know that they were at that upper end of the Pac-12. Unfortunately, just didn't have a strong quarterback play. They're honestly probably my pick to win the Big 12. Oklahoma State right up there with them. The QR code guys, we haven't gotten into that yet. And then Kansas, I'm not sure what version of Kansas we're going to see. So the rest of these games kind of feel like 50-50 games. I think Nebraska has the edge on them, though. Baylor maybe has the edge. But yeah, like you're saying, I could see 7-8 wins. I could also see, 5-6 wins. Just totally depends on how these other teams in the Big 12 shape out. Again, I was a big Pac-12, kind of Big 10 guy, so I'm not familiar with that depth of what the Big 12 looks like. But again, cautiously optimistic that the team is going to be better this year.
That's all I got. Those are the 22 teams I wanted to talk about today. Do you want to end by talking generally about college football? There's a couple of things news stories we could talk about if you want in the college football world. I'll let you take the lead there. I'll let you kind of lead us where you want if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most important developments I think we've seen in college football over the last couple of days is general managers. First hired by Alabama. I cannot remember the name of the gentleman. Unfortunately, I am blanking on his name. But Alabama has officially hired a general manager to handle all things related to their NIL collective. I think this is something that we're going to start to see amongst some of the larger programs because head coaches aren't equipped to deal with this sort of information, not necessarily information, but this sort of work, right? When you're signing these NIL deals, like these are agents, right? Who their objective is to get the most money possible versus a head coach who's like, hey, like, I just want you to come play football, for me. So you're adding in another intermediary and another layer to college recruiting. I think it's probably the smartest thing to do if you're a big university is get yourself a general manager because that is going to allow you to focus on football instead of focusing on, so and so wants more money. And I think Mike Gundy, when he's not talking about drinking and driving, brought up a great point where, hey, like we're not talking about NIL until December. I don't know, or I don't care how you're playing right now. I don't care how you played, during training camp. You're not getting more money. At this point in the season, it is time for us to go out there and perform, not having your agent call me to talk about, getting paid more. And I think that is a great point made by Mike Gundy. College football is transitioning and it needs to take steps that will allow it to produce the best product on the field. The last thing you want to see is a head coach so focused on getting XYZ guy, a couple more dollars for his NIL deal, and he's not being able to focus on the film and the prep and the setting up his guys for success on the field. So Alabama is just, the first domino. Word on the street is USC also wanted to hire the same gentleman. So expect USC to go find somebody soon. And, maybe some of these, I don't want to say failed NFL GMs, but you're going to start to see a lot of these director of player personnels and these, former NFL GMs start to step into roles with college programs, making north of, $500,000 a year.
Courtney Morgan is his name. He got paid $825,000 a year for 3 years. It's a lot of money. To be a GM of a college football program. It's a new position. I got a lot to say here, if I may. I love this. It's what's needed in college football. I see a future, and what I'm about to say is going to be really off the rails. So bear with me. I see a world where not only does college football decouple from the NCAA, I think eventually it decouples from programs specifically. Like you'll be affiliated with a college, but we're talking about professional football players here. They get paid to play football. They go to school because it's like this weird BS thing we got to do. You played college football. I played college football. I wouldn't have been where I was without football. And some of these guys they're not there for school. They're there for football. They're there to get ahead in their career as a football player. They're getting paid to do it. They're trying to get to the NFL. I see a world, maybe not soon, maybe it's farther down the road, where you make the Alabama football program a separate business entirely from the college. It's literally its own thing. And we decouple from the colleges as well. You'll have the college's banner. You'll probably pay a licensing fee to the college to use their colors and their logo. I think sooner than later, though, we're going to see college football truly become a professional sport. I'd like to see that. That's the direction we're headed. That's what happens. It's better for the players. I like that they get degrees. Like some of them, a good friend of mine, guy I used to coach with, I don't know if we're friends anymore. He used college football to get a undergraduate degree, then get a master's degree and do really well in life. He makes like a ton of money now and has a really good job because he used his free education to really get an education and do all that.
Yeah.
Not everyone does that. I just think I'm tired of the NCAA's nonsense, especially. I'd like to see that minimum we get away from the NCAA and just do your own thing. But I really see a world where we just truly own that, hey, these are professional athletes. They're playing their sport they love. They're getting paid to do it. And that's why they're here. They're not here for school. Let's not pretend anymore. Courtney Morgan being hired as GM is the first step of that, in my opinion. And it's like, hey, the quiet part's getting said out loud. And part of why I really believe in Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss is now he can openly pay his players. Like he's allowed now to say, hey, yeah, I'm going to pay you whatever money it takes to get you to Ole Miss. instead of having to do backdoors anymore. The SEC is going to go
Mhm.
crazy. How do you respond to everything I've just said?
I'm aligned with the decoupling from the NCAA. I think that writing's been on the wall for a number of years. All they're trying to do right now is go at Michigan for absolutely no reason, just because they're sad that no one else respects them anymore. I do not see a world where college football gets decoupled from the universities. I think the universities and their IP is what is valuable, right? In those college football games fund parts of the university, including the other sports. So if you were to decouple college football, what are the implications for the other sports being played at the university? I don't see that happening in any way, shape, or form. And I think that still that there is a value on having a degree. And again, not every person wants to go and go to school and show up to class and earn that degree. But I still think that that is too valuable of a part of life, and I don't think that that would be worth it for the young kids. And for that reason, I think and I hope that us as adults would protect those young kids from removing the academic side from the football side. Removing it just doesn't make sense, and I don't think benefits the athletes. Again, while we're paying them and they are professional, at that point, why not open up the age of the was it the UFL? Is it the UFL now?
Yeah.
That plays in the spring. Like, why not open up the age range to 18 for the UFL now, as opposed to having to grab? Because at that point, that's all it would be. Then do you take all the money and put it into UFL teams? Now you got to have tryouts and rosters. Like, it would just change the whole dynamic of football, and I don't think in a better way.
Here's where I
Decoupling
would.
from the NCAA, I'm all there. From the universities themselves, I don't think would work.
Well, no, but I think you're missing what I'm saying with decoupling from the colleges. I don't mean disaffiliating. I mean being a separate business entity. If I were running the college football program at Alabama, I'd be like, hey, how come all the money we're making is lining the pockets of someone else? Why is it being used for other things other than us? We're generating the revenue. Why are you giving it to the tennis program? Why are you giving it to the cross country program? I think at some point those conversations are going to be had. Money is everything, dude. People argue and fight over money all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
I look at college anyway as kind of a racket. I have seen how much some of the presidents are making. I've been to their houses sometimes and seen how they're living. And you're like, off of education, we were supposed to help children. You're making this much money living this way, and you're charging how much? And kids are going into how much debt for college? It's getting insane. Like, this is now my
Mm-hmm.
personal political stance on college. Like, it's a racket, dude, designed to make money. I really hate how predatory college is on 18-year-old kids to get them to sign student loans and locked in any crazy deals, and they force you to live on campus. My point is this: there's all this nonsense associated with colleges that doesn't have to be there,
Sure.
and at some point it's going to go away. And I just see a world where that happens. And I realize my camera's out. I don't know why. I knew you can hear me. You can't see me. One thing we talk about the NCAA that bothers me. They have now suspended Iowa's head coach Kirk Ferentz and an assistant for one game because of some random violation. I'm just tired of
Yeah,
these
I just saw
crazy.
that.
It's just like, dude, all these weird BS violations. It's getting silly and nonsensical to me, and I'm over it, and I'm tired of it. And I just not only do I recommend decoupling from the NCAA. I think what could happen is programs saying we're not going to share money with a college anymore. It doesn't make sense. Like, why are we giving money to this thing that isn't helping us at all?
Yeah, and that makes complete sense, right? Wanting to be able to manage the funds that you're bringing in. Again, at what cost? Is it just football that decouples? Is it the entire athletic department that decouples? And again, the impact that would have on other collegiate sports, like the sports that other people are going to,
But they don't care.
college for. And I know that
Why would Courtney Barrett or whatever the guy's name is?
football doesn't, right? Football doesn't care, right? Because they're the money maker. But some men's basketball teams that aren't, your Dukes, your Kentuckys, like, they're not making money, and then go on down the line to baseball and softball and all the sports that a program or that a university may have that they're proud of and proud to have. Again, football might not care, but I don't see a world where you can take football out of an athletic department and still have a functioning university. And for that reason, I don't think it would happen.
But again, you're asking the wrong question.
Because
Respectfully,
then you're not going to have
you could have, Alabama football could exist without the college. You would just have a bunch of guys that wear red shirts and an A on their shirt playing football, and we'll call it Alabama football. Like, my point is, I see a world where it's a separate business and you pay a licensing fee to Alabama
It's still associated
University.
with the school, though.
Yeah, you pay a licensing fee.
So is the licensing fee going to be equal to the cost to keep the other programs afloat? Like, what would that?
That'd be smart, wouldn't it? Like, if you're Alabama, the university, that's what I would do. But I just think those conversations are going to be had down the road.
But then at what? But then why even decouple if you're still paying that money back the other way?
I don't know. I'm just saying, like, I see a world where people in the football world are going to start asking, like, hey, why are we sharing money with this other entity? That's all I'm saying. I think it's at some point those questions are going to get asked by the people dealing with college football, and I don't think there's a great answer. Why should Alabama's football program give money to the tennis program or the basketball program? Like, why do they care? They don't care. It's not their job to care. It's their job to win football games and make as much money as possible. So unless the university can come up with a reason why the football program should pay that money, i.e. a licensing fee. My point is, like, I think there's going to be those conversations, and it's going to be really interesting where we go. Like, where's college football 20 years from now? I don't know. Are guys going to be wearing Oregon shirts and they're not, they only represent the university because that's the licensing fee they pay to keep fans interested in the program they knew? Like, maybe. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense at all?
Are you implying then that I could play for Oregon football that is different from the University of Oregon and not have to attend classes at the University of Oregon?
Yes.
So what is the age of entry? How many years of eligibility do I get?
Yeah.
Let's just start there.
After high school, you get 5 years.
That question feels like it would be impossible to answer.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. I don't think these are the things for us to solve, but I think they're the questions that are going to get asked in college football for sure. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that these conversations are almost definitely happening behind the scenes. And as we go further into the future, slight changes and decisions are going to get made that are going to impact players and who you represent and how much money is sent where. These are all going to happen. It's just a matter of when and who decides what.
Yeah. I don't see it trending in that direction. But like you said, in 20 years from now, who knows? Kind of on a similar topic of these NIL collectives and the impact that they're going to have on college football, Oklahoma State adding QR codes to the back of their helmets. All the QR codes, from what I understand, like, they don't go to the individual player. They all go to the NIL collective. I'm curious if they will be able to track the specific QR code. I'm sure they will, to see who's bringing in the most donations to the NIL program as a player. I don't know. It's interesting. Like, what do you think about the QR codes and the objective of trying to scan it and donate to the program?
It's so stupid. Like, how often do you really get a close-up shot of the player's back of their helmet? Like, how do you scan that QR code? That's what I'm saying. Like, it's so far away and tiny that, like, no one's going to actually do that. Put it somewhere, like, on a program that you hand out to all the fans. Put it somewhere that, like, is actually accessible. But I mean, I don't know how much it's going to be, unless they're banking on ESPN zooming in the back of helmets all the time to, like, get that shot. I mean, maybe that's the plan, right? I just don't. I think it's in an unhelpful location, even though it's an interesting, although kind of, it feels scammy. Whether it is or not, I don't know. I mean, everything about college football feels kind of slimy anymore, but it feels weird, and it's also impractical. Again, how often on your couch do you really get an opportunity to scan the back of someone's helmet? Like, or in the stands from 50 yards away? Like, get the hell out of here. That's not possible, right?
It feels so, going door to door asking for donations. Like, you remember in high school football, you used to have to go do those fundraisers for
I never did it.
For camp and whatnot. So you had to go knock on the door and sell them like a coupon book. You never did that? I was
Dude,
slinging
because
coupon
I
books. I
was the
tell you, if I
quarterback,
wasn't in
so I just
marketing,
got away
I'd
with
be in
whatever I wanted.
sales.
Dude, as the quarterback, I was like, I'm not doing that.
Unbelievable.
Good luck. And I just didn't do it. And what are they going to do? Say you can't play? Like they needed me. So I was like, well.
All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's to me kind of what it feels like. But I also think, maybe for media day, right? On those graphics that they create and distribute, to the different networks and to their internal team, are they putting the QR codes there? So on the Jumbotron, after so-and-so scores a touchdown and he's doing his thing, is there a giant QR code right here? And then, like you said, on the broadcast, are they going to try and, get a tight shot and zoom? But then if I'm ESPN or if I'm whoever's broadcasting the game, I'm saying, hey, if I'm going to go out of my way to get these tight shots and, my executive producer who's in the studio saying which camera to go to and when, we got to get a little slice of whatever's being donated. I don't know. I think it's interesting. To your point, feels a little weird and scammy, feels door-to-door salesman, feels Cutco knives. But it's interesting because it's somebody pushing the envelope, and I'm curious to see what this next evolution of that is.
It's going to get eyeballs and attention, which is what matters. And that QR code is, I'm sure, going to be put in other places other than the back of the helmet. The back of the helmet, it's newsworthy. It's the only team in college football doing that.
Point. Yeah.
It gets articles written. It gets attention drawn to it. It gets people saying, "Oh, we can donate to Oklahoma State football." I just wonder, like, I have never ever considered donating to a college. I have so many other problems in my life I'm trying to solve. Like, dude, I'm trying to pay my rent. I'm trying to buy food. I'm trying to save up for a house. I'm trying to get an engagement ring. Like, I'm not fucking giving money to any college football program. Get out of here. Who is donating that money? It's, I guess it is rich people that want a tax write off, I guess. But man.
Well, you know what? I would love to see QR codes. Like, just imagine on the sideline, every athlete, kind of like a big accordion file, and everyone's got their last name, and you can thumb through these big, like, what you hold up to like call a play. You just got a bunch of those with QR codes on it. You score a sick touchdown, you just get to hold it up to the crowd, show everybody your QR code, maybe, and it's your QR code. This goes
like
to
your
you,
Venmo,
so you can get a couple of drinks after. Yeah, you can get a couple of drinks after the game if you're over 21. Maybe getting a drink for you is getting a McDonald's Sprite. But wouldn't that be fun? Just like, hey, show me some love.
If you're really smart, you just tattoo your Venmo on your forearm or something. How can they stop that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a loophole. I think that's what LaMelo Ball discovered in his deals. Like, he put like his clothing brand tattooed on his body, and they made him cover it up in the NBA because it went against their deal with Adidas or Nike, whoever it is.
It's not an official partner of the NBA, and the NBA is very particular.
Yeah. I got one other bit of news we could talk about if you want. We talked earlier about,
let's wrap it up.
If LSU goes 11-1 and Texas goes 11-1, literally today, Wednesday, August 21st, they announced the tiebreakers for the SEC, so we can talk about if that actually happens. Obviously, head-to-head competition is prioritized, right? However, LSU and Texas don't play each other, so if they both go 11-1, that's not great. The other consideration after a head-to-head meeting is the record against all common conference opponents. Then after that would be the record against highest, best placed common opponent in the conference standings. And then it's a cumulative conference winning percentage. And then it's capped to relative scoring margin against all conference opponents. So, and then if all those things don't pass and they're still tied, it's a random draw of the tied team. So it's pretty unlikely we're going to get to the A, B, C, D, E, F, which is a random draw of the tied teams. But that's actually possible, where if they both go 11-1, Texas could still go in over LSU. I don't think it's possible because, again, they're going to really calculate who did better in the conference, and I think LSU is going to end up doing better than Texas. But there's a possibility here if Texas and LSU both go 11-1, Texas could make it in over LSU, even though I think LSU is more deserving of that spot if they're both 11-1.
Yeah, what are their common opponents? Why don't we take a look at that? Texas A&M, Arkansas, and Florida appear to be their common games.
and I've got both beating all three of those games. So I guess it'll come down to winning percentage in conference, which is still going to be, again, the only loss is Georgia.
A draw.
So it's going to keep going.
More points against these teams? Who scores more points against those teams is what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, for real. I think they're both going to go 11-1, and it's going to come down to who scores more. And so it's further incentive. Run up the score. Like, do not don't be classy. Like, score as many points every week as you possibly can, because you're not guaranteed anything in the SEC, apparently.
Facts.
So yeah, if I was LSU or Texas, I wouldn't mess around. I'd be like, I'm scoring as many points I possibly can every single game.
Yeah. And if I'm either one of those two teams, I am running and hiding, because the University of Oregon is coming, baby. Coming for everybody this year.
Well, Nathan, it's been a great episode. I really appreciate you, man. I think we did justice by these college football programs we talked about. We're sitting at the 2-hour, 55-minute mark. We've got Patreon questions. I think we just leave it for another day. And maybe I'll sit down and record a Patreon episode by myself and answer a couple questions we got. Unless you want to answer some, but I think we could save them for next week. It's crazy. We've been doing these long episodes during the season. I think we'll actually have time after the end of episodes to answer Patreon questions, like 6, 7, 8, or 9 of them, something like that. But when we're doing season previews and covering 22 college football programs, it's hard to also find time to do like Patreon questions. Do you kind of agree with that strategy?
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yeah. All right, man. Thanks for your time. I love you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And dude, have a great night.
Love you too, big dog. We'll talk soon.
Absolutely.